No. Okay, calling to order Hastings Board of Ed meeting January 7, 2019. So with that, I'm going to pass the meeting over to Dr. Wilson to give us some announcements.
Well, actually, Doug, I'm going to pass it back to you shortly because I know you've got a big report to make and we have a lot on the agenda. No, the only thing I would like to comment is the kids have just been back to school for a couple, 3 days. But we have been busy as a follow-up to the last meeting. Certainly, for example, with the outcome, the support of the bond, we have begun the committee. And I'm going to actually ask Jeremy, who's heading up that committee, to be the one to report back on that. But we've had, I think, a very successful first meeting to plan the marketing or the presentation of that, and I think that's off and running. And
I'm sorry, Charlie. What meeting did you have?
Jeremy had helped us with the meeting, and several others that are planning the presentation of information, the information stage now. Looking forward to that in the fall.
Was that a facilities committee meeting?
No, that was an ad hoc, really doesn't have a title. I sort of just named it tonight by virtue of the fact that several of the people who will clearly be involved in this, and I have to say, we are very fortunate to have the people that we do. Certainly, Janine has tremendous experience in a number of schools you may or may not know about in helping to get information and being successful with respect to school bonds. And so we asked her along. Of course, she did a lot of work also here for the Fields bonds I've been told about. So naturally, we wanted to pick her ideas, and of course, Maureen, with her experience and her knowledge and so on, and Jeremy, who has a real interest and who has been on the committee for a long time now, the building committee that has gotten us to this stage. So this was just a first meeting, and I know that what we have planned tonight is to share the conversation tonight with the rest of the board to make sure they know what's going on. If they have input, that's very important. But it's also important to note that we have very little time with respect to what we're aiming for the actual vote and where we are. So we want to hit the ground running, and I think we did a good job of that this evening. And I'm just going to leave it at that because I know you do have a lot really to cover, and as do other people around the table.
Okay. Yeah, there are in the agenda. You'll see quite a few dates. I won't go through all of them, but a lot going on in the month of January, and you can see those under the announcements in 1B in the agenda. So now I want to pass it over to Clay for a student report, just to fill us in on what's going on in schools.
I was just wondering if we get more, I want to have more coordination with SU. So is there any way we get an agenda of the Board of Ed meetings prior to them happening, maybe by email or something, so we can take it to SU to figure out and discuss the problems, so I could bring more stuff to you guys.
And just as background, I know I had emailed the group that we were meeting in an effort to try to make the role of the student board member a more meaningful role. So I just met with Clay and with Elliot.
So I'm just a little confused. To have the agenda to take it back to the SU?
Mm-hmm. So that we could review with them and better understand it and kind of raise issues or have any comments on it, so I could bring it to you guys.
I think the SU, you were saying, meets on Thursdays.
Yeah, in the morning.
And the idea, which the two of you helped me understand it a lot, the idea of the student rep is really to connect us with the SU, but we're not really getting SU comments because everything's happening after the fact. So just as an example, I just, Elliot and Clay and I just went through everything, and there's things they may have thoughts on, but they don't know. But if you just look at an agenda online, it's a little hard to know, and they don't get it until
right. I understand what you're saying. I guess I think that historically that there are the student board liaison meetings, which I think we should be sure are happening, where there's representatives from the board. Okay, but I'm saying that's important. And I think that, I'm not sure that I think that we may not be able to have our agendas in time for the SU meetings on Thursday. I think we've gone through this before about the time we need to have agendas ready. And if that's not possible, I also think that Clay you could meet when you're with SU, just give them a broad update of things that are going on in the district and see what kinds of, I don't think it has to be a week by week. I mean, I think students might have questions or comments, for example, about the bond or space even at Hillside, but I don't know how much it's important to have the exact thing that's being talked about as much as to get a feel for a reaction from students or questions or comments or suggestions. I mean, that's just would be my...
One thing Elliot had raised is I think they are currently doing what you said, where Elliot or Clay would go back to SU and say, this is what was discussed, and there's usually not much of a response from SU. So I think the current model isn't working that well. In terms, again, I don't know draft agenda, but maybe if there's a way to sort of say, this is what the board's going to be looking at, at the next board meeting, and then to get the feedback of the students, and then that filters in through our student member.
Well, one thing that could be helpful is we've got, so in June, back in August, we came up with 7 core goals that the Board of Ed is working on, and those had a drill down, so there's about a 2-page document there. And I think a lot of those are kind of evergreen topics that are things going on throughout the year that have a lot of different angles to them. So that's one place I think that could be really valuable to get some ideas for what to bring to the student union. I think another is there's a group of people working on curriculum ideas, things that are important curricularly, from standards to different programmatic ideas. Those are things that potentially the student union may have some interest in. So I think there's probably a lot of different things. I would probably tend to agree with Jody that the agenda itself is probably pretty specific. It may or may not give you what you're looking for, but I think those big topics from the board goals to there may be even some other district goals that's not at the board meeting. You may find that very interesting and want to talk about that and bring it here without reacting to our stuff, plus some of these curricular topics. So that might be a good place to start.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just a couple more things. One thing that I think as our high school is working with challenge success and the idea of not stressing our high schoolers any more than we do. I would like to I assume there's going to be board agreements that would say to let our students know that if they need to leave, that say after, I'll just pick a time now, 9 o'clock, because their schoolwork demands them to come home, play as an athlete, he's doing sports after school, that he's coming here, that if in his judgment he needs to leave to prepare for a test or write a paper, that we should respect that. And I know our policy has always been that activities, schoolwork comes before activities work. So I just want to throw that out there to see if the board has any, has any concerns with that. And, it wouldn't have to be an announcement, the student member would just leave when he or she thinks it's appropriate.
I think you've got to use your judgment,
Makes sense.
I'm good.
Okay. Oh, and also we just said, to obviously know that we welcome student comments, and if at any time during any of our discussion, even if we don't look to you for an answer, please feel free to raise your hand, and the president will recognize.
Clay, I would just like to add, I'm not sure if you were there that day, but recently, as you may know, maybe you were there, I came in to work with the group and did a lot of listening. And you guys made a great contribution to ideas and suggestions with respect to the strategic plan, which is under development. So that was very important. And I've had the opportunity also to come to another couple of meetings, and I've been always impressed with the work you do. And certainly, when you come in here, and I should think you know this, but please do understand, you're always free to bring from your group to this group. You have a platform here. It's always open to you to do that.
Well, yeah, and to reiterate that, I guess I'd like to make that request in the opposite direction. As opposed to bringing a board agenda, which all of our board meetings are aired. You can see everything, to the extent that the student union has a topic they feel dovetails with something happening on the board. You can go through the video, see what's happening. The agendas tend to follow somewhat linearly, following on an issue from the previous week. What I would like to know with the second half of the year now just getting started, what are the 1, 2, 3 primary topics that the student union's thinking about? And that's not particularly looking for solutions or, a deep research report, just to have it on my radar, because as you sit here and this conversation's now unfolded, I frankly have no idea what the student union cares about, which is, I'm at fault for that. I'll be first to admit it. But it would be a nice place to start in terms of raising the relevance of the position that you hold, is to be that link between the student union. Certainly, we can increase dialogue around agendas, and to the extent that there's overlap in discussion, that's great. But if there are pressing issues for the student union, if there are things like the impact of stress, and that's being talked about at the student level, and trying to figure out how to, et cetera, I'd like to know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else that you had?
No,
for-
I mean, like, the biggest reason that, like, we were trying
Are
to
you
get an
talking to the
agenda.
mic? Yep.
The biggest reason I was, like, thinking more like that is because, well, when I say, like, what happened at, like, a meeting, or, like, what might happen at a meeting, it's just like, okay, cool, next, BLT. Like, it doesn't really seem like ever go in discussion, which is why it's, like, a lot harder to, like, get stuff. Which is why, like, I think, like, or agenda, or maybe, like, the 2-page paper that you were talking about, I don't have that. It's probably accessible online, but if someone could send it to me, that'd be really helpful.
We'll get you the goals.
Thank you.
And I would just have to say, I think a real important discussion that we could be having, certainly at the moment, is about the school bond. And you'll pick up a lot of information about that tonight. And that is something that's very important. That's some information that should be circulated amongst the students as soon as possible.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Clay. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to open it up now to public comment. I want to remind everyone, keep your comments to 3 minutes. Just state your name, you're a resident of Hastings. Again, if you're not a resident of Hastings, don't state that you're a resident of Hastings. And with that, I'll pass it over to the public for comments.
Good evening. Nina Siegel Kennedy, and I'm in absentia representing my husband, Will, who's home with the kids, 35 Fraser Place. And we wanted to mention that the community is aware that a small group of administrators approached and met with several of you individually to raise concerns about Laura Sullivan. And we find this
Doug, does this fall into personnel?
No, we can't talk about people, specific people.
Okay, I will, let me revise my remarks. That a small group of administrators approached and met with several of you to raise a personnel concern. And this to us is profoundly disturbing on a number of levels. You know that we support Laura and believe she's been working tirelessly to implement the audit. Classified children who literally went for years without classification, rewrote every IEP because they were so poorly written.
Nina, can I?
I'm going on to, okay.
Can I interrupt you just because you did raise the name already?
All right.
And there may be some issues that you're referring to that are now pretty clear and obvious, and these may be things that are personnel matters that really shouldn't be discussed by name here in this meeting.
So I just want to say that we've done some research and consulted with other boards within Westchester and also Connecticut and elsewhere in New York State, and just about the process that went on. And one board president said, quote, "There's nothing good to come from a meeting like that." A second board president said she was shocked, dumbfounded that anyone would think that that was okay. And another said that by meeting individually, that there constitutes a violation, at least in the spirit of the open meetings law, and that it may have been done, without knowing, but they advised that absolutely any board member could meet with anyone one-on-one. But when all board members meet separately with the same people, hoping to influence the board on the same action, that also really goes around the authority of the superintendent, who's essentially the CEO, and who, in our understanding, should be entitled to attend all board meetings and executive sessions, except for in limited circumstances. So I guess the question that we had is that discussions with the board about the work history of specific personnel or proper subject matter, we thought, for an executive session of the board, based on the research that the community had done, and that the board's job is to simply approve the superintendent's recommendations for hiring, resignation, tenure, and not so much to get involved in personnel. And we again know that potentially many people did this maybe not knowing, but given the political heat that seems to be going on right now that's affecting our students, we just would really like to say that we do support the superintendent in executing personnel issues, and we just respectfully ask that the rest of us stay above what seems to be just some politics that are really starting to affect our kids.
Okay. Okay. So we're going to move on to a conversation of a budget update and timeline. I believe Maureen and the Finance Committee have some. Did you?
Right now, do I need the president? Could I just speak through, talk through it? I mean, I have.
It says an attachment.
It is okay.
Or you can put it up.
Well, do you want to go through this first, and then we can reorder it? Just
Sure, we can do that. Yeah. I actually didn't see that on the screen behind me. Why don't we'll take things out of order. We'll do 3B first, and then come back to 3A.
That's already.
Excuse me, is public comment over?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there more comments? There didn't seem to be anyone moving or rustling. Or...
Didn't ask. I think there were.
go back.
Okay, let's go back. Are there more public comments?
Hi, I'm Eva Alligood. I'm at 157 Rosedale Avenue, and I'm not going to talk for a long time. I'm going to express a concern having to do with the bond, preparation for the bond proposal. I heard at the beginning of the meeting a call for haste and a sense of urgency that this needs to move along and that you're on a tight time frame. And I just want to say I have a lot of questions about the material that I've reviewed. And I've reviewed a lot of plans. I'm on the planning board. I've been on it, the Hastings Planning Board, for over a decade. And I know that a lot goes into creating plans. A lot has to happen before a plan is even created in terms of understanding the problem you're solving for. And certainly when you're going to the public to request a major increase in budget appropriation and a raising of their taxes, I think there needs to be a lot more information about the problem you're solving for and why this solution is the right one. So there's a lot of technical questions I have in terms of why the proposed addition is on a steep slope. Sorry, I keep going too close to
away from you a little bit. Further away, yeah.
I think that the decision to put the addition at Hillside in a place where it's going to be essentially, from one angle, viewed as what's going to look like 3, maybe even 4 stories coming up the hill. That's the kind of project that we always ask a lot of questions on when it's proposed to us on the planning board, because visually I think people don't understand until it's built, or maybe until they're given more information, but it is quite imposing and in my view not in keeping with the current structure or even the terrain of Hillside, which is beautiful and could be better integrated. So I have questions on the actual design, energy efficiency, the impact on the operations budget. But I also, again, I just want to go back to this very simple basic point. What problem is this solving for? And is this the right solution? I think you have to go through a process of looking at what those potential solutions are, and certainly bring the public along, because it seems like you've had meetings, you've discussed it, but I think this is obviously major change to Hillside, which has been functioning and certainly was adequate for my children during the entire years that they were there. And I personally just haven't heard a lot of clamoring for a major investment in the infrastructure of Hillside. And so I think if you're going to make that case, you really need to provide a lot more data and a case and more backup programmatically for why it's needed. So I just wanted to share that because I know you're going into that difficult period where you're going to try to get support for it.
Could I comment here? I may have, only because I said something that may have been misleading. I didn't mean to imply that this had not been long studied. In fact, this began with a committee well over a year ago and has continued nonstop, week after week after week in meetings. And I think you would find that it really has been thoroughly researched, as recently as just in recent weeks where a large members of the community have been here and had input. Now, that is not to say that we don't have our work cut out to get out information. And you're a good example. You know, we need to explain and answer all your questions and the other questions that may be out there. And it's only that part of the process that I was referring to that we really should get out there sooner than later so that people can have their questions answered. But I wouldn't want you to think that we cheated. The district, it seems to me, has invested a lot of time over a year in looking at all these different options.
Yeah, I was aware of the 2 community meetings. Unfortunately, they came at a time where I wasn't able to go to evening meetings. It's a busy time of year, and there's always going to be that case. I understand that. I think there are a lot of steps along the way, and I'm sure this started a while ago. I'm just speaking as a member of the public who hasn't been brought along, and based on the information that I've analyzed, I have a lot of questions because the information that's in the plans does not provide me with answers to my questions. So that's all I'm trying to share, just as by way of, again, not wanting to go down the road where something is proposed to the community and there's a lot of pushback because simply people have a lot of questions and also justifiably are really concerned about the cost. This is huge. This is a lot. This is not just upgrading, roofs, doing something, building something that clearly has been a need for a long time that's been identified. These are things that are a surprise to someone who's found Hillside to be quite more than adequate. So I just want to share that, and I'm sure there will be more opportunity to provide information.
Thank you, Eva.
Hi, my name's Sarah Brockus. I live at 37 South Calumet Avenue. And I'm here to express support for the Director of Special Education. And just to say I know you see a lot of the same parents here around special education needs, but just to say there are many parents in the community who do not necessarily have children with IEPs, who have children who are academically quite advanced and accomplishing great things. We still support the need for strong special education support in this community. And many of us strongly support the need for the Director of Special Education to be at the cabinet level. And we support the superintendent and his work to get us there. And we hope there's always integrity in the process. Many of you ran on a slate of bringing integrity and transparency to this board. And that's why I voted for you, because we wanted a change in the way we work. And we wanted to feel like we were whole and organic, and it's a community working with you in that way. So I just encourage each one of you to remember that, and why we voted for you, and why we campaigned for you, and why we were hoping for a change in the way we work together. And I hope we remember that in coming weeks when it will be important. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Ann Melvin, and I reside at 24 Whitman Street. I echo what Sarah said. I strongly support the hiring of an assistant superintendent and director of curriculum. I do think that they need to be at a higher level than building administration. I think we all know why. I think that's very clear. I think that there might be more residents that need to know, and that might be the next step, because it really concerns me that things that have been going on in this district for the last 10 years that I've watched are still going on. And there is unethical and immoral behavior taking place on individuals on the Board of Education and within the administration of our buildings, and I really have a problem with that. We are too wise of a community to allow a few people to hold us hostage like this. We need to put an end to it and get back to the business of children and educating children, all children, in the best possible environment. We are only as strong as our weakest, most struggling student. That we are only as strong a community as our most struggling student. So find our most struggling student and do everything for that child, because that is all we are at the end of the day, if nothing else. And I implore you, those of you who are being, I used the word last meeting, masterful. Please look up the definition. There's many definitions for masterful. Some of them you could just put, but some of them, some older definitions when the word was first created, it's going on. I implore you to please pay attention. There are smoke screens being thrown up all over the place. And I'm very disappointed to hear now that there's a focus on something else. It's a person, that's very unfortunate. I feel sorry for that person. I've been that person. Not for the district, but I was in a role within the district. It's a really crappy position. And it's really probably, I'd almost bet my house on it, meant as a smokescreen. Nothing else. Nothing else. Please pay attention. There's much more important things to be doing. I beg you, I don't know what else to do. I have so much respect for a few of you. And by the way, I would really like to thank all of you so sincerely, and thank you so much for being here. You are such a rock star. And Tim, thank you for saying you want to hear from the students, because yes, you have the answers. I mean, you all have the answers more than any of us do. You do. You do. But thank you all for the time that you put into this, because I think about it a lot, because I think about this a lot. And I know that I really appreciate the work that you're putting into it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Okay. So let's move on now to bond update and communication plan. And what's that?
Well, I wanted to, because this presentation's up and then I have to get out and try to get it on my email.
So I'll kick it over to you, Maureen. I'm not sure how you guys want to lead it. Who goes first?
Well, I guess, can I just, before you talk about that, okay.
So, as the board knows, tonight you have, as part of the business items, a motion to move forward with what will be put on the ballot in terms of the bond. What has changed, I think, since the last time, based on the board direction, was to increase the budget for the boiler, and then there was also money put in for furniture for the Learning Commons area. The timeline that we are hoping to have the bond vote will be February 28th, which fits within the 45-day requirement from our first publication, which will be this Friday. And then we anticipate that'll keep us on the timeline that we've previously proposed in terms of when we would hope to have the submissions to the state and be able to start our process in about a year's time in terms of bidding. So I think that's what you have before you, which has been prepared by our bond counsel. After tonight, after the board moves forward with voting yes to put this referendum up for the vote, we will then be working to secure a construction manager and work to get further testing of the area done in preparation for the actual construction, the vote. Those are things that'll be happening in between. So I think that's it as far as that. The other thing I mentioned to you earlier was that, I guess, after this, I just wanted to give you an update on the space meeting that we had today at Hillside.
Maureen, before we get
Yes.
there, may I give a comment
Sure.
on what you just said?
Yes.
Okay. I was surprised to see the change in the bond. We've been telling the community it's 17.3 million is what's being proposed, with a tax increase of 2.28%. Then when I saw the referendum from bond counsel, that there are a number of changes which we'll talk more. One, the square footage changed. which is a big point of discussion, but we'll get back to that. But I saw that the bond increased by $1 million, literally $1 million. Instead of being a $17.3 million bond, it's now an $18.3 million bond.
Right.
I know we're including the boiler, which is probably about $500,000.
It was about 700,000 was the increase in that.
But I was surprised to see the rest there, and it's not anything, if there were a discussion about it, I hadn't heard about it, and I'm not sure why we're including the furniture for the Learning Commons in the bond. I understand we get discounted money, but if we're going to add several $100,000 more, maybe there are other things we want to discuss as a board. I'm not sure who made the decision. Actually, let me ask you, who did make the decision to put the furniture?
Well, I think at the last time, in terms of just looking at the overall scope of work, just to make sure that we, actually, that wouldn't even probably be enough, but gave us a little bit of money to include that as part of what we thought the construction. I know there was some concern about some of what Amy had proposed and whether we would in fact be able to do that. So I think it was based upon, I guess, somewhere along the line, like I included that after speaking to some board members, I guess, or after, just to make sure that there was enough money in the overall proposed budget, but we did distribute that, and it was a line item budget. So, I mean, up until today, when you, I guess, mentioned it, was it today that you questioned that line?
No, it was a couple days ago, because I've been asking you about what's the tax increase now,
Yeah.
because we're adding another $1 million.
But in terms of that particular line item, I think was the first time you brought it up today.
I don't recall, but I guess,
Right.
well, I mean.
But just forget, Lisa, it's $800,000, and then those are also subject to contingency, inflation, and the other, professional fees on top of that. So when you escalate that by another, like 20.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
But my question is, and I think we have to be really on top of this, that board decisions get made by the board, not by one person, not by two person, not by three. They get made in a public meeting by the full board. So this wasn't made, I'm not being critical of you. But it's something I think we need to discuss. Do we want to bring the bond up that much? Because now, instead of being a 2.28% tax hike, it's a 2.5% tax hike. And again, wait, let's not forget, that doesn't include what we hike the taxes in the spring with the operating budget. County taxes are going up by 2%, George Latimer has told us. The economy has a grim outlook, a volatile outlook, and we can't deduct SALT anymore. So if we're going to add another couple $100,000, I think it's something that we need to discuss and agree to.
No, that's fine. I mean, the one thing tonight, if the board felt inclined to reduce the furniture out of the scope of work, that is something you could go around and discuss right now, because the bond council said you could actually modify, if there was a change tonight, prior to the vote, we would just modify the amount right on the board agenda, and that would be legally allowable. But in terms of just the boiler, let's be clear, I mean, the entire board said to include the boiler replacement, so now we're just talking about the change in the furniture. So I think there was some concern, I think, and maybe it was a reaction to, and I think maybe you even brought it up about having enough funds available to do the Learning Commons. There was some discussion, or somebody, maybe they were concerned we wouldn't have enough.
We talked with Amy. I suggested to Amy that she could actually have all that furniture and everything she wants in the current library rather than wait 3 years from now. And I suggested to her that she put in grant applications to HEF, and you can get some of it. I mean, they talk about rolling chairs and rolling bookcases. We could have that next year.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Can I just be clear on what else? So, what are we talking about here? $800,000 heat generation system above the 17.3, $100,000 Learning Commons.
That was it.
Furniture. It's.
But we have $1 million. Oh, and then the soft cost.
Yeah, the soft cost. That's what escalates the cost. And I also just want to be clear, the increase, and when I gave you that number before, Lisa, as we all know, the interest rates are rising. So it actually would have been, it really was only like probably more like a 0.1 increase, because if I would have recalculated the last bond figure, it would have been up a little bit anyway. Like from that 2.3. Like
currently, this version is 2.5.
Right, so I didn't even clarify that, but just for purposes of if people were doing the math and saying, how could that $1 million increase that from 2.3 to the 2.5, that was the reason as well. I did it based upon the recalibrated interest rates.
Maureen, what you're thinking now about why I know Joe's here, why we should replace the boiler instead of the way we were thinking before?
Well, I think it was based on the board's concern about, although we knew that we could retube it and get 5 years, there seemed to be an overall concern. Now, what Tim had suggested, I think we may do, is that may be a later item within the bond scope, but I think the board was too concerned to not, either you had to decide to include it or not include it.
Okay.
The conversation at the time was it may not be needed, and we could give that money back, but...
We're better off getting it if we need to do
in the next year
it.
and a
Right, it
half,
just goes in your capital.
something
Gotcha.
happens, right. I think you have to give it back.
But yeah, you do have to give it, you have to do something. You either have to give it back through, I think the vote would have to be to return it to capital reserve.
And I think the Learning Commons, Maureen, you and I, the day after the last board meeting, had a conversation
Was
about
that?
that. And I think that one of the, I hadn't seen anything on it since then, but I think one of the reasons for it was there was a lot of conversation about people having a lot of interest in that Learning Commons. And you and I were just talking about what is a way to ensure that it gets built in the way that we're thinking about it in advance. And I think we talked about then one way could be to add this. I realize this hasn't been sent out till now, and we had that conversation 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we can talk about that 100,000 now. And I think when Maureen and I spoke about it, the idea was that when you think about what's getting created in Hillside, one of the things that's come up quite a bit is this idea of a cafeteria, and I know there's been some pushback in the community around the cafeteria because people have different opinions about that. And I think one of the points that the board was making, we were discussing, was it's about more than just a cafeteria, it's about space planning. And one of those things that could get created was amidst the first grade, kindergarten, and second grade classrooms is a central learning space that could become a learning commons. That's the library, and a learning commons, updated learning commons, and that there was a lot of really positive people in the community talking about that as a great idea. Early childhood education center. There could be a lot of different things to do with it. And so the conversation Maureen and I had, I think it was the day after the meeting, on Tuesday the 18th or so, was maybe it's worth putting an extra $100,000 in there to do some of the furniture so that we can build that up as quickly as as the actual addition is done. But that's the last we spoke of it, and it's here. And if the board wants to take it out, we can certainly take it out.
And honestly, as I'm sitting here, because I was thinking also about like the budget for that room and some of the ideas we wanted to do it. We felt we could take on the construction piece with our internal group, which we had spoken about with the board. But another piece that I recently had Joe scope out was that we then realized that we didn't account for like a central air being put into that unit also. So I guess for me, part of it was whether the 100,000 be spent on furniture or just in terms of that space in general, there may be a need to have some additional funds if we were to decide to do a central air unit for that, the cafe, so that it would be, with all the windows, it does get quite warm in there.
Could be part of the 100,000?
It could be. I'm saying, I guess at this point, as I'm thinking through, like with the furniture, that was another piece that kind of developed afterward that we would have had to either use district level funds to do.
Is the current library air conditioned?
It has window units. This space is larger, and they're really not as efficient, and I believe they have, Joe, is it 2 units in there? In the current library. They use 2, right?
Yeah, I think they have 2 on.
Yeah. I mean, the idea,
It makes me wonder, because I've heard from other people, why are you going to move the library from a room with lots of windows to a room with hardly any, so much so that it had to have a skylight and it has a small wall of
No,
windows?
it has the windows across the back.
It's got the windows that look out onto a small atrium. It doesn't have the windows that the current one has. All I'm saying is, and I know people have talked about the noise, but now I'm hearing early childhood center there. That's going to be noisy. I don't know, but
Lisa, I'm just throwing ideas out. Please don't grab onto anything as if it's some foregone conclusion. I'm just talking here. Okay.
I think, well, I'm sorry, I quoted you. Okay. So anyway, again, it might be something that we reconsider down the road. I don't know, because I'm hearing other comments. But let me ask you this. If we're having this discussion, as you know, we've had a long email conversation about other issues related to pricing on the bond. Do we want to have that conversation now?
I mean, I had asked Veronica, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, so Veronica, Maureen, and I spent an hour this morning talking about that. And so I wanted Veronica to walk through all the calculations. I'm comfortable after the hour of talking to her that the way that she calculated it is correct. There is a change, something that you spotted, that there was, I think, a little bit of a typo, that our cost will go up, actually. You found something that they had gone under, so we do.
Two mathematical
We are going to
errors in
raise
square
the cost by $500 for one of the things that you found. But I did want Veronica to walk through all the calculations, because we spent an hour this morning,
That'd be
and
great. That'd be great.
and I'm very comfortable based on her explanation. So, I think it makes sense for Veronica to kind of lay out exactly how she did the calculations, and then we can have the discussion.
That would be great. And Veronica, just to put it into, I had sort of two large issues that I know we spent, this past week going back and forth. One was, and just to put this so everybody understands why it's so critical, what is the actual square footage? Because the price of the bond is determined in part by the square feet. What we're asking our taxpayers to pay is determined by that. So we determine how many square feet are being added, and then there's a multiplier, which I believe we're using 450. So just to, so everybody knows why this is, why this came to the forefront, in the documents that we gave the public at the public meeting, it says that the amount of square footage is 10,750. Yet when I read the bond document, I think the referendum, it went up by close to 2,000 square feet to 12,500. So now if you want to talk how much money does that mean, that's about $1 million difference in cost. I then went through the latest plans that were given to us, which are not as complete as I would like. I have to tell you, there are measurements that aren't there that have made this a difficult project. There are square foot measurements that aren't there. And when I've talked to my architect friends, they say, these plans aren't sufficient to move forward. So I'm frustrated by that. But I added up everything that was there, and everything that was there added up to about 10,300 square feet. Then I tried to estimate for where you didn't include numbers for me, which are the two small hallways, and I don't see them coming in at 2,000 square feet. So the square footage is really critical. So that's part one.
Yeah.
The other part is how certain mathematical. So why don't we do this, and then I can.
I want to just make sure that we're clear too, because I know there was a comment about the process. H2M is working on Irvington. You can give all the different schools that they've done. I think the district has hired an architecture firm that's done this a lot. We've also got a bond counsel that's protecting us in terms of the way that they do the bond counsel. So I want Veronica to run through this, but I don't want anyone to think that we didn't hire firms that have done this before many, many, many times.
I don't think anybody thinks that, and these things happen. So, for example, in Scarsdale, that just had a huge bond, midway through the process, they had an analysis about whether they should tear down, renovate a school, or build a new one. Halfway through the process, after they had decided one path, a finance guy in the audience says, "You did your calculations wrong." And you know what? He was right. And they had a great architectural firm, too. So it happens.
I spent an hour this morning, and I think she's right. So,
I'm glad you did.
Let's let her run through.
Let's not have us opine. Let's have
if not, we have a
the
problem.
professionals, please.
Sure. Thank you for that. So in terms of arriving at the numbers, there's never been any change in the square footages. The numbers, the square foot numbers that are presented in the floor plans that were presented to the district are net square footages, which is the interior floor space that we show that the space is going to meet the requirements that the district needs for a classroom or a cafeteria or whatever the space happens to be. And so those are net square footages. However, we don't calculate the cost of the project based on the net square footage. We calculate it based on the gross square footage. The gross square footage includes the thickness of all the walls, as well as all of the corridors and all the other spaces that are small and somewhat insignificant in terms of identifying an overall master plan for the proposed addition. So the total, and I'm absolutely comfortable with the number, and we've checked it many times, is, I'll give you the exact number. $12,535 square feet. So we've rounded it to 12,500.
Could you put a projection up? And because I'm working off the plans that you've given us, and I hear what you're saying about the thickness of the walls, but again, the only places where you haven't provided the square footage is in the hallways.
It's the stairs, the hallways.
The stairs and the
the stairs, the hallways, the bathrooms, the thickness of all the walls. The elevators.
No, the elevator's in there.
No, the elevator does not, the square footage for the elevator is not accounted for in there. It's typical for any building that the gross square footage is going to be 10 to 20% higher than the net square footage.
I just,
It's
say,
the
maybe I'm a
number-
layperson,
The
but
the
looking at
number
this,
is correct. The number is
You
correct.
want to explain the CAD process?
Sure, yeah, so and it's not from adding up those numbers. These are all computer-generated files, and they're actually at a one-to-one scale. And so this file is actually a computer-aided drawing, and the way we calculate the square footage is we literally draw a polyline or a line around the entire perimeter, which is what Megan is doing right now with the mouse. And based on that polyline, we are able to take the area of that, and that is the 12,535 square feet for the first floor as well as the lower level.
So I took the line, just so that way everybody is clear, from this point right here, that's the corner of the building, from the existing wall to the new wall, right down to here, straight across, over, down the exterior wall to our new exterior wall, across, back up the other side of the cafeteria, here, over to the corner of the classroom, and back to here. And that space in there was, I believe it was a little over 9,000 square feet. I don't have the exact number out the top of my hand. And then for the basement level, what made up the 12,000 square feet is I went right again back to where the existing classroom is, straight down here, over, back up, and then over and across again. And that.
Wait, could you show us down there?
Okay, so downstairs, so this is the corner wall where I started upstairs. It's the last classroom in the row. We're going down the current exterior wall of the building, which will now be butting up against our new walls. Straight down across. This is where the corridor currently is downstairs. All the way across to where we'll be providing the new corridor. And across again to where the exterior doors will be. Over to where our new classroom will be, and straight across. And this whole number comes out to the 12,535 square feet.
Okay, so is this correct? So for the lower level, when you add up what's on the lower level, you have classroom, storage. That's 2,119. So the remainder, the little, not the elevator room, that's included, or that room, the elevator and the hallway then are about 1,000 square feet, is that correct?
That elevator is not included in the numbers that you added up.
So elevator plus hall are 1,000
The
square
hall,
feet.
the set of stairs, and the thickness of the walls. The walls are about a foot thick, so imagine a foot thick wall running across for 30 feet. It adds up on the square footage.
All right, listen, I will defer to your expertise on this, but I would love if you could send me your calculations. That would be great.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that, Lisa?
If you could, I said I'll defer to your expertise, of course, but if you could send me calculations, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, we can't do it tonight, but
No, not tonight. No.
But we
But
can-
if you could send me your perimeter calculations, that would be great.
we can do that. That's okay with the board. Sure. Absolutely. So, yeah, so we're very comfortable that square footage is correct.
Should I ask about the pricing questions now?
Yeah.
Okay. So the other question I had, one was there was a straight-up mathematical error of $500.
That's correct. Yep, and that was only in that email. It's actually not been in any of the spreadsheets that have been previously distributed. That was just a typo in the
That's the
emails.
best answer on that.
Yep.
So we now
issue.
have $500 or more cost.
Pardon me?
They were below $500.
No, I know,
So
but
we're-
that's not good.
So we're going to
because if
add
it's-
up. We're
I
gonna
know,
add
but
$500.
if it's priced low, then we need the money. We have to pull it out of operating budget
And let me-
or reserves. So we want an accurate price point.
Well, let me also just clarify, this is the maximum number, and that these are percentages, and that A&E firms, as well as construction manager firms, typically always work off of a % of the construction cost. So ultimately, the final fee by an A&E firm, any A&E firm, or the construction manager is going to be based on the final construction cost of the lowest responsible bidder, including all alternates that the district or the client would ask us to design. So that's what the price is based on. So it's really, I mean, at this point, it's, we want to protect you and make sure that you have the maximum number, and the intent is for it to be lower. That's why we build contingencies into it.
Okay, so another question on the pricing.
Sure.
We have the price for the addition is $5,975,000 before we add in the percentages for the soft costs.
Yep.
So then there's a 15% design contingency, a 4% escalation, a 7% for you guys, a 5% for construction manager. What I found in the calculations, and you can tell me if this is proper practice, is I would have assumed that each of these 4 multipliers would be multiplied against the base. But what I found is that the 4% escalation was not multiplied against the base, but it was multiplied against the base times 15%, which yielded an extra $75,000.
That's
is that
correct.
accurate?
That's accurate, and that is an industry standard. So the 15% contingency includes design and construction contingencies. We're budgeting for the fact that the bids could come in 15% higher, or there's unforeseen field conditions that would result in the bids coming in 15% higher than the base number that we've budgeted for. So if we're budgeting for $5,975,000, which is $450 a square foot times 12,500 whatever square feet, you add the 15% contingency in, and then from there you add inflation onto that, because we could anticipate that potentially the bid is going to come in, or bids are going to come in at $5,975,000 plus the $896, plus potentially 8% in inflation, which would put you out 2
Okay,
years.
so this is industry practice then, to
Absolutely.
base the escalation off the base multiplied by the design and construction contingencies.
correct,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. That's the best answer.
Yep, you're welcome.
Monica, I just had a small question about the kitchen. Is there somewhere else in the plan to have multiple entry points for the children, like getting lunch, or is that the one entry?
No, into the cafe, not the kitchen.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I could actually.
I just
so
wasn't sure if I was misreading it. So
yeah. So actually, there's two corridors, and Megan, if you can point out the 2 main corridors that will bring you down into the cafeteria and the kitchen. So is that one? Yep, and that one there.
So where are they actually getting their food?
So we haven't designed that yet, but what I would envision is that they're going to queue either inside the cafeteria or in the corridor, however the district decides to do that, and that somehow there'd be a serving line that's going to be on that wall between the kitchen, right where Megan is showing, between the kitchen and the cafeteria. And then any food deliveries that would come in, obviously it'd be something that you'd work out with the district, work out with in terms of operations, whether or not deliveries would come in right through those doors, Megan. Yep, right below there, and then right into the kitchen, or whatever the process is that works out, which is best and secure for the district. So.
As long as we have you in the hot seat. Sure. An architect friend asked me why we're not doing a basement under the cafetorium, because she said it doesn't have to be finished, but it's a nice placeholder, because as we discussed before, and I think everybody agreed, we may not be adding enough classroom space.
Well, so we could certainly add a basement underneath there. It's going to increase your cost, because right now you're building into a hill. So we're actually taking advantage of the natural terrain that is in that area, because we're building into the hill. And the reason why the classrooms are only in the back is because the grade is lower back there. So we would actually be increasing the cost considerably by digging out the hill, which I would anticipate, sorry about that, I would anticipate has rock in it. And that would, so we'd have the additional rock removal as well.
Veronica, can you speak to where you identified additional classrooms to go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So one of the things that we've talked about with Maureen and Jeremy, and we've talked about in a little future, whether it was a 4-classroom addition or 6 classrooms, whatever it happens to be. And we wanted to, although we don't have a boundary survey, so we can't be absolutely sure with the numbers, and that's something that the district will need to get as a boundary survey once the bond passes. But there is potential to actually add additional classroom space, and Megan is showing you right now. So you potentially could put a 5th and 6th classroom stacked on top of each other, just to the left of where we're proposing the addition. And we would design this addition so that we literally could just extend the corridor and add the classrooms on without reworking a stair or anything like that. So.
Please, anybody else feel free to go. I don't have to monopolize. Another question that was asked was about how high the ceilings are and the impact on our heating costs and our air conditioning costs.
Well, I did provide that to the board. I think I could pull up the number, Lisa, but that was a question that we did. You had asked that a few months ago, and I know I provided that for both the auditorium air conditioning as well as the heat.
Yep. Yeah.
I can pull that out.
Back on that
It's
information.
an issue that we're making a a costly place to heat, a costly place to climate control because of the
Are you talking about the
upstairs.
cafeteria?
The cafetorium.
Well, I think we did, but I mean, Veronica did provide to us, it is going to be more energy efficient, and the idea would be to have, potentially solar put onto the building as well, but I think, I believe that the number was fair. I want to say it was like $12,000 a year or something additional cost.
Yeah, so we can go back and get those numbers again.
And that was with it also adding space and central air, like, and all that, which would be actually more efficient than what all the window units we have now, like that whole wing would be central air.
Well, let me ask you, energy efficient, are we designing this like to like the top environmental standards and all of that?
You are required to meet the current environmental codes, so we absolutely would be designing them to those to the codes that are required, which are definitely stricter or more stringent than when this building was originally built. So this addition is absolutely going to be more energy efficient than what you have now. Just like any roof we would replace on the building, because insulation is required to be thicker now. It's more energy efficient, or windows that we replace are more energy efficient. But it hasn't been discussed that we be designing it to get a certification like a LEED Gold or something like that. However, this is just standard practice with H2M that we're going to build as many cost-efficient but also energy-efficient items into the project as well. And we'll present those ideas to you as we design it, because we want the building to be as energy-efficient as possible.
Yeah, and in our town, I'm not sure if it's done by village code or just by what we're trying to do. It's very much of an important factor to our
absolutely, and very important to us as well. However, keep in mind that as a school district, you are required to follow the state education department guideline code, the building code of New York State, and that the state education department issues your building permit, not the local municipality.
Well, let me ask you a question on that, and it's something that that Eva Alligood raised about the steep slopes. We do have a village code put out for health and safety about building on what's called steep slopes, and I understand that we are controlled by the state, not by the village, and we can ignore the heck out of the village if we want. But I assume that that's been put there for the good of our village. Has any analysis been done? It's not in the CEQA report about the steep slope.
No, it's not. You're not required to follow the.
No, I know we're not required, but it's there for good reason.
Sure.
Is it something that we should analyze?
We've looked at it in terms of building a building addition on this site, and this really is the best location for putting an addition on this site. It's the most open space. It's the least amount of trees that would be coming down in regards to putting an addition. It makes sense in terms of the interior of the building and where. Just in terms of the flow and where it works, in terms of programmatically on the inside of the building.
Would it pass, if we were required to follow village code, which restricts how much you can do on steep slopes? I don't know if you've analyzed it. Would this be permissible under the village code?
I haven't analyzed it because it's not a requirement for this building.
Okay. And sorry, another thing, I was surprised to see that the balcony, the exits from the cafeteria to the balcony, like if God forbid there's a fire there, that the balcony is not included, the balcony on, but we're hoping to.
No, but I did speak to the bond council and Veronica about that. I mean, I think what Veronica had said in terms of when they looked at the square footage numbers, they do it to develop a budget for the scope of work. That will be in the design, but I think I don't know, but I believe what you said is you felt as though the amount of money afforded for the entire design, like they didn't feel they needed to also put another separate line item for that. But it will be included in the actual design document as been shown.
And that's okay?
It's fine. Because I think what really, when you look at a bond council, and again, it's not down to like the bathroom will be here, you're going to, it's saying that we're going to build this is what the net outcome, that's why the square footage numbers are not also included in the document, because you're really saying to the community, you're building a building addition that is going to have X, Y, Z. If you decide, oh no, we're going to put a gym there, that would be a problem. Being off a couple square feet, as long as it's within the scope and you're delivering what people are paying for, that's what we're required to do. And that's why the bond council, in his drafting of the resolution, it's not as specific for that reason. So when I spoke to him and I said about what is that? I'm sorry?
No, I was going to say go back to the other floor.
When I spoke to them about your concern about that not being in it, Veronica, as long as Veronica, what she stated was that it will be done, it will be in the documents that we ought to bid.
Absolutely.
That would have been a problem if she would have said, oh no. That would be like false advertising, we're showing it, but then we weren't. But we need egress anyway, right?
Yeah, and actually, let me clarify. So you absolutely do need egress out of the building, and egress out of that space will not be the required points of egress out of that space will not be onto that balcony. Not that it couldn't be, but it's actually going to be through, and Megan, if you can point, yep, you're going to have the doors there that are going to go out to a stair, which is going to get you down to grade, and then you're going to have the doors on the other side, yep, that are going to also get you out to grade. And then there'll also be required exits, I think, out of the stage area itself. So that'll all be covered. Really, any doors that are going out on the left-hand side to a deck area is just extra doors that aren't required. So.
Veronica, thank you very much for all your hard work.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anything else? Anything else?
I think does anyone have any other questions?
Do we want to come to a decision about the furniture?
Yeah, we're going to go. I just want to make sure before Veronica sits down.
I can get up again.
Okay. So, so that's one. What else before we move past the actual plans? There's the furniture. Are there any other items that we need to talk about? No? Okay. Yeah, so coming back to that, maybe can you just say a little bit, Maureen, about the different options there? So one is to include it in the bond, and the other options are?
Right. I mean, I guess to your, I was trying to remember how even it came to be in there, because I have so many conversations, so many people, so I lose track. But I think there was a concern, I guess, stated about the ability to kind of deliver on that learning commons, or will we have enough money in our operating budget? And then I guess it was you that you had said, well, why don't we put some money in there, because then as we thought about it, central air, and potentially even though our own crew would be doing the construction, there would be material costs and things like that. So just ensuring that there'd be enough money available. And I do think, to Lisa's point, reaching out to the HEF and different people in between. But again, we're trying to create a project, and we can't at this point guarantee that they may have other priorities that we can't be assured at this time that we'll get money from them. So trying to ensure that we have enough money for this project, we decided to put, or the decision was made to include something in there, and I guess not properly communicated to everybody. So, I mean, if the board is not comfortable, so the state aid, you would get state aid back, and I think it just ensures that all the ideas that have been presented so far, that there'd be adequate money to ensure that it's, I believe, needs central air conditioning, to, as we've put AC in all our areas of the school, all of our learning.
Is that included in the 100,000 central?
Well, what I'm saying is, whether we have a certain amount of money in our operational budget, the idea would be that how much can the operational budget, take if we wanted it to be done a certain way. And I do believe that maybe there'd be other options to get money, but I just don't, I think where we are now, we just have to plan for whatever we believe we may need. So that was giving us a little bit more flexibility. But certainly if people aren't comfortable leaving it in there, and although I think it just gives us a little bit more of a buffer to ensure that all the work gets done the way we envision the space to be, I would say to keep it in. But if overall, if the board is uncomfortable with having that additional money in, then, I wouldn't want to get hung up on that tonight, right? Because
yeah, I would agree. I wouldn't want to get hung up on it. I'll just share my personal opinion. Is I think that if, I think one of the benefits to me personally is the idea of creating this learning commons. And if we're going to go that far and create the space to create that, I think this is like taking it the final mile. So my personal opinion would be to include it.
Would be to keep it in?
The 100,000, yeah.
I would take it out. I just think we just raised the bond price. We've been out here telling everybody 17.3, 17.3, 17.3. I think we made a really reasoned decision about the boiler. We had an excellent discussion about it. And I think throwing in an extra 100,000 on top of it, or whatever it is, I get it it's reimbursable, but our bond price is just jacked up a lot. So I would leave it out. And I think there are groups that may be excited to do this.
Like a HEF or something like that?
Yeah, HEF or PTSA. I mean, I certainly wouldn't speak for them, but I know, I can say this. Back in my PTSA days, when we would find ourselves, with a wealth of riches, we would go to our superintendent and principals and say, what great project would you like? And we gave, I think, $30,000 to make a TV studio. We gave, I think, another $30,000 for playground equipment. So parent groups, I can tell you, they get sick of funding technology, but to say we have funded the blankety-blank corner of something is usually a nice thing. So I can tell you that from my experience on the PTSA. I was not part of HEF, but I do know that HEF also, just from conversations, it's nice to have be able to do a grant that's not iPads.
I mean-
Again, I just want to ensure that, like, we're talking about $100,000, it's a big ask. And that's why, I mean, I think that was part of our concern, that with the budget coming up, and with taking on different things internally, like reconstructing the current library, you know, there is a cost to doing that. So I think that was just the concern, to make sure that everything gets done according to what.
You're saying it's a big ask to put into our budget?
Well, I'm just saying is like, it was, I think, at that point, Doug was like, well, do you think we're going to be able, because I think someone must have brought it, I don't remember who, but somebody on the board was like, well, are we going to be able to build this? And I believe we would, but then not knowing having the scope of the cost of furniture, and although I would agree that both groups are really generous, I'm just saying, like, I think in planning a bond and doing this work, and if we are going to recreate the space, like, we need to have that money. And I just think, like, I'm kind of now leaning toward, like, unless the board feels uncomfortable with the process, like, the money is an important thing, just to ensure that it gets, when it's ready to, get everything squared away in there, that it's done correctly.
So the extra 100,000 brings it to the last mile, because it's essential for a library or media center to have air conditioning. First and foremost, I mean, materials can't be languishing because of humidity or misuse. And additionally, I think if the money is there for the architects or the central designers to make a comprehensive plan for what it looks like, instead of ad hoc committees contributing money to certain furnishings, I think we will have a better suited space for student use. So I would encourage us to keep that money available.
So, I want to go back to what Eva pointed out, and I do think it is really incumbent upon us to be very clear that even though people, as always, maybe this bond isn't as public in some way as the Turf Wars bond was, but I do think that people who've been involved know what's been going on and for how long it's been going on. But at the same time, I think there are a lot of people and people in the community who don't know about it. And I think really it is incumbent upon us to explain it in terms of really the way that Eva framed it, about what are the needs and what's the best way to solve the needs. And I think we've come up with that, but I don't think that that's what people know. And that said, that I don't know what I think about an extra $100,000. I mean, this may sound a little flip, but in the big scheme of $17 million, I don't know if $100,000 is a make or break. And that, again, might sound kind of flip, but I certainly want us to do this in a way where we have what we need without putting too much of a burden on the community. I don't even know if we've considered, we're talking about the Learning Commons and furniture, but have we considered furniture for the additional classrooms?
That's where it becomes, like, between that and other things, like,
Okay.
as it keeps adding up, I think the idea was to at least then have money set aside for that space, because we always have a furniture budget for our classrooms, that we spend between $50,000 or $100,000 a year just in
Okay,
furniture.
so I just want to make sure we're covering that. And in terms of, I love the idea of the Learning Commons and how it's been thought about. Personally, I don't like at all the pictures that we've seen and the way it's been designed. It doesn't, I feel like there's a lot that could be thought about how to do. It doesn't move me in the least to think about two spaces where kids could sit, and what about the other kids who aren't getting to sit in the spaces? I mean, those pictures really didn't do it for me. The concept does it for me, and I would hope that we could come up with other ways that we might configure and use the Learning Commons. But again, if we think that it's best for us to put it in the budget instead of having to burden the annual budget in terms of getting money that we're going to get back, then I think it's wise to be very thoughtful about what the cost would be and and add it to it.
And that's kind of the thing, because we've had a lot of conversations, and we can sit here and probably add even more based upon different people's comments, but I think that was just one area as the costs kept stacking up, and like you said, there are other, even in the current library, there's going to be a considerable amount of work. I mean, I was up there the other day, and I could tell you it is, and if we weren't going to be doing work, it needs a rehab. The flooring in there is destroyed. It needs brand-new floor. I mean, a lot of it is worn down. I was there for a faculty meeting, and it's really not a great, like, in its current condition, needs a rehab. So there's going to be money that's going to have to be dedicated to getting that room, new flooring, potentially new window. Well, I think there are some new windows being put in there, but even like reconstructing it and whatever that may require, and new walls. What was that?
So Maureen, the construction work that's planned for the old library is not included in the bond?
No, that's square footage, because that would have to be on the budget somewhere, right? The square
So
footage
it's
is not, no.
Okay, so this is really hard because I feel like there's a lot of competing things. We're talking about money for furniture, but at the same time, we're talking about a renovation that we're promising people that we don't have funding for.
But that's my point. We do have funding, we have an interfund transfer every year, but again, you're asking why the furniture, and I'm trying to explain, like, you know, the board can fund it on that given funding year however they want, but in the discussion and about what people's vision for the space was, the idea was like, well, maybe we would be better off putting some money there just to ensure the learning commons. I think the interfund transfer can take care of the construction, but when the library itself, going back to 2 classrooms, and we have classroom furniture like that occasionally, like we remove and we have extra sets of it. So we're not concerned about putting furniture in that space, but between doing the construction, the idea was maybe we are better off putting a couple dollars into the furniture, because then that will be at least one thing, being that's kind of a newer space, not just a, you know, we have tables, we have desks, like we could pull from the attic. Like for other classrooms that, when they went to the Laddie model, they changed all the furniture. So we do have, and many of them, actually, I was there today, and many of them actually still like those desks in the 4th grade in different classrooms. They don't want to go away from that, but we do have classroom furniture because we had invested so, and the HEF actually paid for a lot of that furniture. So, but even at that, we still had to put, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars into the furniture for that, you know, over the course of the year. So bottom line is we have furniture, but I think for the learning commons, it's different type of furniture. I think as we're planning, although it may be a good idea, but when you're planning for something, you can't say, well, we'll write a grant, because I hear that sometimes, but I don't think, just like I was told for the playground, and then, you know, unfortunately, like HEF does have money, but they have a lot of other things that are going. So will they be able to give us $100,000? I mean, are we?
I wasn't thinking 100, but I think, you know, between the 2 organizations, you have a good chance at getting at least half and maybe more than that.
But I mean,
I wouldn't put in for 100.
only because the last time I heard that about the playground, and we ended up funding it, and I did put in a grant, and unfortunately, at Hulse, the district funded that entire playground, and now we have the new middle school playground, and I don't want to get in too far, but I think even the PTSA, they may expect us to pay for some of the equipment this time. So I don't know if we end up changing out that other $20,000, or I didn't know whether we would have to pay any of that.
Well, we don't know the final cost.
Right.
So.
But I'm just saying, we can't always rely, I mean, we have some responsibility to provide things that if we're proposing it, so.
Well, just to be clear, if construction's plan to be done the summer 2021? 2021, right?
Summer of 2020.
But it would be done
Oh, done, completed 2021.
2021. So now we've got we've got the existing cafe space, right? And it's finished in the way that it's currently finished. What's the plan for what we would do to that space before we put furniture in? We would have to build some stuff out.
We would probably ask Veronica to assist in creating like a vision for the space.
Right.
We would do a small, like, kind of, and then Joe and his team would either work in creating the construction.
That summer or
Yeah.
something.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you meant the timeline, yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about, like, you know.
It would be like coinciding with like them finishing up meaning the contractors finishing the addition, then Joe
So
would
summer
go in that summer,
2021.
yes. They would be doing both the library and the,
Okay,
cafe.
got it. Okay.
And you could be, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's.
Yeah, I mean, my view is that it's 42.4%, right, is the aid? So really, this is like $58,000, and it's like less than 0.5% of the total bond, and this is sort of, it makes a lot of sense. And to be honest, you know, people still have to give money to HEF. It's kind of a backdoor tax if you're kind of expecting it to come from HEF, because, I mean, to Maureen's point, they have other things that, you know, people are asking for, but also, you know, I think it's more transparent to say there's $100,000 in the bond than, hey, we hope that you'll give money to HEF as well. I mean, it feels like the money's coming from people in any way.
And just to be clear, are you for it then?
I am for the,
So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 for it right now. Where else? 1, I don't know, you're against it, so 1's against
I
it.
just think it's too high. But it's a
I'm
funny
for
thing
it,
you
but I
said,
hear
because,
Tim.
wait, I just want to follow up on what Jeremy said, because it was actually a nice idea. But when I came away from one of the bond hearings, and you could really see that our town is changing. We have an influx of great wealth, and the income disparity in our town is greater than ever. I don't say that in a good way or a bad way, it just is. And what somebody said to me, an older member, he said, you know, it's so great that these younger families have the money and they want to invest it in their school. And they said, but they can't put the burden on the older people who can't afford it. And what they actually said was,
I don't know that
wait,
it's
may I
changing
just
as
finish?
much as you
May I
think.
just may
I mean,
I finish,
I've
please?
been here 12 years.
Jeremy, may I please finish? Please?
All right.
Please, thank you. What they said actually is, this is the young people, you know, who do have the money, not all of them, but the ones who do, they can channel it into PTSA, that there are grant-giving avenues. I'm not saying to replace the bond or anything, but I just want to put it out there almost as a public service announcement, that it was a great comment that somebody said, if you have that level of wealth, and if you want to support your schools, these organizations are an excellent, excellent way to do so.
Let's just keep focused. No, Ann, please, please. Ann, please.
Very inappropriate.
Let's just stay focused on the topic at hand here. We have a couple people we haven't heard from, Tim and Anisha.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for all of your comments, because I feel like I've been just ingesting a lot, and my voice sounds very raspy because I'm still very sick. Yeah. But I hear both points very clearly. The struggle that I have internally is that we had pretty much set a number that we all felt very comfortable with, and now we're going pretty much above that number. And if we still think that that's the best way to go, then I can support that if that's the way that the board feels. I just think that we do have to think of it as it's not a drop in a bucket. It is people's lives that we're talking about here when we're talking about adding. It might seem like a small number, but it affects people's lives. So I'm still sort of just taking things in for right now. But that's what I wanted to comment.
I don't know what you mean by affects people's lives. What are you referring to?
Well, because what we had originally proposed was a 2.3% increase,
and now the number affects people's lives?
Yeah, exactly. So that increase is affecting people's lives, and I think that we've heard a lot from community members who feel both sorts of ways. So if we as a board feel like we should continue with that higher number, then I say we'll support that and we'll put it out to the vote. But personally, I'm having some struggles with this number.
What is the difference if we go from 17.3 to?
Is probably a very small.
Yeah.
I think we're only talking about the 100,000 here.
No, but if we go from 17.3 to 18.3.
We already discussed that. We all
agreed about
essentially
the
6 of us agreed at the last meeting that
about the boiler.
17.3 plus the boiler expense was going to 18.2 to 18.3.
We're going up like 100, let's say 10,000, 115.
And what does it come out?
But the self-tax
tax-wise, what does it come out?
A couple dollars a year. What's Maureen? What's
Maureen, what does it
come out to average family?
Whereas before it was $48 for 100.
It's got to be under $10 a year per family.
It's under 5.
What is it?
What is it? Under $4.
It's like under $4 a year per family.
So instead of $48 per $100,000 value of your house, it would be 52-ish.
No, but that's per 100,000. I'm talking about for the whole year.
$4 a year more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, and I think that the last discussion cuts to the heart of the issue. 17.3 plus a boiler, 18.2. In the final iteration of putting together for bond council, we determined $100,000 will give some flexibility around actually furnishing the new space. The $100,000 is a couple bucks per family. I recognize, I'll be the first to recognize, I think this is going to create, as Lisa seems to be suggesting already, additional fodder for, local arguments against. I find that very unfortunate. But I think that the inherent logic behind this addition and doing it right will ideally prevail I support the additional $100,000. I do hope that we can effectively communicate work scope changes going forward. All of us that have done any addition or any capital work in our own lives recognize that there will be work scope changes that occur, and if every work scope change turns into a 45-minute discussion at a board meeting, this is going to become a very difficult, an increasingly difficult process. A capital process is not easy in any capacity. In the environment that you just discussed previously, with state-level taxes and SALT and all the issues that we're all quite well aware of, it doesn't get any easier. And hopefully we can be respectful, recognizing that something even like this, a bond scope document, is not a finished ironclad template that's going to describe the financial implications of the bond. It will continue to be a living document and a living process. So just to reiterate, I support the $100,000. I think it makes a lot of sense. I hope that we can all be sort of thoughtful professionals, recognizing that this discussion won't be the last of it, and hopefully we can move more quickly through them going forward.
No, Tim, I agree with you, and I think you raise a good point. And I think the error that happened here was communication. I think, we were not told the bond was going up by a certain amount. We had to find it in the document, and then didn't find out from today that something new was being put in. So I think if communication happens better, we're notified earlier, it gives us a chance to figure out what's going on, and I don't think we'd have to have such lengthy discussions here.
Yeah.
In terms of the money, I'm not going to hold anybody up. It's the will of the board, so.
Are you comfortable supporting it?
Pardon me?
Are you comfortable supporting it?
I think we've added too much, honestly, but, if that's what the board wants, then fine. I think, look, I moved here because we don't have a lot of diversity in our town, but we have economic diversity, and I think it's part of what makes our town, and we keep inching this up and inching this up. Wait, just please let me finish. We keep inching up and inching up, and I understand that this is relatively quite small, which is why I said, if that's what everybody wants. But I do think we really have to be aware that the people who moved here 15 years ago are going to struggle with this.
Certain board members, make a significant point around suggestions of these dramatic economic changes that are happening within Hastings. We have a certain housing stock that is competitive with the entire rest of the housing stock in the area. That's been a constant, right? So it's not. It's a hypothesis that's yet to be proven that Hastings is materially changing economically to the disadvantage of prior residents in a way that's different from the broad sort of growth and change of the river towns, of southern Westchester, of the New York City metropolitan area. The housing stock hasn't changed in a way in which small houses are getting leveled and replaced. I've been here a decade. Jeremy's been here 12. Any number of us have been here a number of years. Houses aren't getting leveled to then get replaced with McMansions and people getting pushed out and getting bid in. It's just a suggestion that I hear every single biweekly. Until it's proven, it's a hypothesis and a story. So, and I'm willing to be disproven. I'm not arguing one way or the other. It's just not fact.
A proven fact.
The Greenberg Town assessment has changed people's lives.
Yeah, we got to keep rolling here, and I understand.
That is,
yeah.
More research needs to be done on that for the community, because you are going to hear a lot. And you should have started thinking about the community before it hit 17 million. So now $100,000.
So, Eileen, please. So let's move. I guess we don't have the vote on the actual bond resolution until the business items, so. And we have to do the secret first. So we've got a few other things to do. It seems like the bond update, the communication plan, I wonder if, how long do you think we take to go through that?
Communication plan, and then I'll get this.
Okay, yeah. Why don't we do that?
And then, so one of the things we do need to nail down is, before the end of tonight, is our community forum dates, because we basically need to have, I would say, 2 to 3 before February vacation.
Before February vacation.
Yeah, I mean, the vote is the week after February vacation. So Doug had asked me to spend some time with Charlie and Maureen and on sort of the information campaign, and Charlie laid out a nice list of ideas that he has done over his career with $90 million of bonds, and Janine has done a lot of the same things over her career here in Hastings, but also in other districts that she's worked on. So the first is prepare a video with presenters like Charlie, yourself, Doug, Maureen, to talk about finances. That's something that we had talked about probably having ready to go like beginning of February, and have, what did you say, about 3 to 4 minutes video. The next thing are some of these community forums. 1 to 2 community forums like we did in the past, and then maybe speaking at PTSA meeting or SEPTA meeting or some other groups that can host a meeting as well. There's also a newsletter that Janine will be putting together that will get mailed out and also emailed. That will be around beginning of February. And then there's some other ideas, and you guys have the paper, and if you guys have any other additional ideas, let's discuss. But one of the things we talked about was, if there are folks, and we've heard from people who said, hey, I do support the bond, and I want to help in ways that I might be able to. And so maybe having people remind the community to vote, not how to vote, but just remind them to vote and when the vote is. Also, press releases, is that kind of connected to the enterprise? Is that? Well, there are some releases that you must do, right?
Well, there's 4 legal notices that will run between now and the budget vote, starting this Friday and alternating every week.
In the enterprise?
Right, and Journal News, those are our 2 newspapers. So legal notices regarding bond rules.
I'm sorry, where, Janine, the Journal News and?
The Enterprise, there are 2 newspapers for the district. So.
We had talked about posting of banners, potentially. You said this is possible to do, a banner that is near where I think there's
Corners.
Yeah, I think there's a Little League registration banner up there right now, so maybe there's a second slot that a banner can go up. And then also updating the FAQ. We did the original FAQ in September or October. The idea was always to update it with new information that comes out. So we're going to talk about that later this week and then pass it around. Yep.
With regard to the old FAQ, I want to make sure that we explicitly correct an error that's in one of the last ones where it says, what happens if the bond fails? And it says we have to do the work out of operating budget or reserves, but it leaves out that we could float another bond. And if we have inaccurate information out there, it could lead to it could be a basis of a lawsuit to undo a positive bond vote. So I want to make sure that we affirmatively correct the incorrect data.
Yeah, and I guess we should talk about, as a board, what we do want to do if the vote doesn't go down, because I don't know that we need to have another vote right away. I mean, I don't know that it's a law that we need to
Now, you
have a
have
vote.
a window, Jody, you may know it better.
Well, you don't have any
90
time,
days or
it
something
just
like
has to be no sooner than 90 days.
Right.
But I mean, beyond that, it could be
Anytime.
180 days. I think
And you
that-
can only do 2 in 1 year.
Yeah, I
There are
think
some
that-
legal
right.
restrictions.
I think I would suggest that the bond, like we did the first time, we do an exit poll, because if it in fact it did go down, and depending on the reason for it, it may require, it could be another year before you put something else out.
I
And you
think
decide to
exit
do
polling
so.
is a great idea.
Were there any other things that I left out that?
No, I think you've done a nice job of covering it. And of course, if the other members of the board have other suggestions, they would be welcome.
Jeremy, can you just talk about the tours that's on here? It says tours provided, scheduled, and
We had
advertised.
actually, I should have mentioned that, we had actually talked about taking that out.
Yeah, that was going to be my comment, just because, yeah, I just thinking about strangers in our building, not strangers, but anyone just, and the potential safety hazard, especially with our little ones. So is that decided to become off?
Yeah, we crossed it out, and we also, radio and local TV interviews, we crossed it out and just said enterprise. It's not really a local radio or TV.
You could do WHOH. There was a
Yeah, so we can keep that on. The other thing, too, is that
Probably just put the video, if they make a video, put that on WHOH.
one important thing is that there is no snow date. So if it's a blizzard, I think the vote still goes on. So
Why is that?
We don't allow them to snow day, let's just talk about it.
Why is that?
You're not allowed.
Just like with the bond, just like with the budget vote, if there was some crazy weather, you're not allowed legally. We asked the bond council because we had hoped to like try to have an alternate date, and they were like, you're not allowed to. So you have the date, you have the vote, and even if the school were to be closed, we would still run the vote. Unless like.
Where do you have the vote? If
You'd
the
have it
school's
here,
closed?
because we still have staff in. And the thing with that is unless, like, the governor would declare, like, a snow emergency, no, like, something like that where you couldn't be on the roads, I guess, even at that point, I don't believe we would have to wait and then either post it for, probably 45 at that point, because it wouldn't have been a no vote, but we would have to wait that window. But schools will have votes in snow. Just, not that we hope it doesn't snow, but.
Along those lines, I've heard complaints. I understand why the timing is, but I have heard like, oh, you want to keep the old people away because they're not going to come out in bad weather. And one thing I was disappointed to hear is that we've reached out to the non-school community through the village email system, I think several times, about our community forums, but we haven't done more to reach out to the non-school community, because if you don't sign up for village, okay, first of all, if you're not on a computer generally, it's a problem. And a lot of people don't sign up for the village emails. So we have to make, I mean, for fairness.
No, well, we did, but that was part, I just want to, as you're touching on that.
Sorry, just, and like leaving these things, because we had talked before about leaving them in the rec center, in the public library, and that hasn't been done. I'm not saying that critically, but we have to make sure, in fairness, that all our residents know.
Right, I just want to, just to act, because I just want to be very clear, and Jerry could, say I said this, I talked about that upstairs, and that how important it is, as always, and just like when the board suggested at our senior citizen dinner that we bring it up, I was very defensive about that because I thought it was not the right opportunity, but as far as getting the word out to them, I had suggested, I have a good connection with Ann Russack at the community center, as well as even working with Ralph and any of the people down there, and just like last time, I had suggested we go down during the day on their time when there may be events going on, and either provide a presentation to people beyond just leaving documents in the library. I thought that we should really do an outreach, and I believe that, I don't stereotype, because I think our senior citizens in this community are very supportive of our schools, and I think that people to suggest that they're no voters is, I know many of them have worked here, many of them are homeowners. That is not true. So I don't believe that I think they're a very supportive group.
And I think we did it before, and I think we could arrange to go to the community center and do a presentation, and either a special thing that is arranged or at one of their already scheduled.
That is the right way, because we certainly have the flexibility, and we want to ensure, because just like the night of the senior citizen dinner, they
that wouldn't have been the time to do it.
most supportive of our schools.
They love our schools, and they want to be supportive. I would also say, I think we need to reach out to the American Legion and to the VFW.
Many of them are many generation here, so I hate that, like, when that even is the rumor, because I don't believe that to be the case.
But I think the real issue is time. I mean, time is really of the essence here.
Yeah, I mean, we should lock down some dates. tonight. One date that I wanted to throw out was Thursday, January 24th.
For a community forum?
Yep. And then maybe something the week of February 4th, sometime that week. Or basically we have the week of February 4th and February 11th, 12th, and 13th, because we're not going to do it on Valentine's Day and we're not going to do it on a Friday. And then it's vacation week.
Well, I think if you do it on Thursday, the 24th, you should pick a different day of the week for the other, because there's some people who might not be able to come if it's a Thursday, who could come on another night.
Yeah, and I might suggest the week of the 11th, maybe the 12th or something.
Of what?
February.
That's vacation.
No.
The week after is vacation.
Oh.
Were you trying to do
That's right.
the week of February 4th and the 11th, or you're
No, I
pick one?
think we just need, I think we need two. Oh, yeah, I mean, January 24th and then one other date. And then some of these where we loop into other groups.
Okay.
We would ask if we can speak, you know, if PTSA or different groups would want to host it, as well as the different civic organizations.
Doug, your idea for the week of the 11th as opposed to the week of the 4th for a particular reason? Or does that work
Just
better?
because it's closer to the actual
Okay.
vote, and it gives people a couple, it's like 2 weeks between.
So I'd suggest maybe Wednesday, the 13th.
Can do that.
There are a lot of people who have Tuesday, the 12th off, even though school's not closed, and some people may be away for a long weekend.
The 12th?
Why? President's Day is the week
City College
after.
is closed.
Yeah, President's
CUNY's
Day
closed.
President's Day is the following Monday.
But some places are closed for Lincoln's birthday.
Oh, that's true, you're right.
Wow.
CUNY's closed classes.
Well, we could do Wednesday the 6th as well.
I'm just saying, so some people might go that whole weekend and not be there
Yeah, makes
Monday,
sense.
Tuesday.
So either
I mean, to be safe, we could try the week of the 4th, so we could do the 6th, if that's a Wednesday, so that's a different day of the week.
Okay.
That works.
How does the 6th look for everyone? Yeah? Okay, why don't we plan on the 6th, and then how does the 24th look for people? January 24th. Okay. Okay, it looks like we have our 2 dates, Jan 24 and Feb 6.
What were the times of the last one? 7 o'clock or?
We did 7, I think. Yeah. Yeah, we did 6:30 start. Yeah, 6:30 start. We could do a 7.
I mean, 6:30 seemed to work.
Yeah.
Was it a good?
I thought it was a good turnout at 6:30, but it works either way for me.
And where do we want to do them?
Turnout for 6:30.
I think the community center
Yeah.
is definitely a good place to do it, because again, it just,
I think it's more accessible, it's more central.
So I think.
here and there, I mean, it depends, I mean, of course, we'll.
You can check their availability, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, something Charlie's mentioned works well is when you get a lot of board members involved. So one thing I think would be very helpful is if we actually get I think we need a physical calendar that actually shows every week between now and the 27th what's going on. And, some will be these community center events, some will be showing up at different places where, for residents who aren't as mobile and can't move. If we go to, I think someone mentioned Andrus at one point you did. I don't know if that was.
And again, not that we wouldn't be willing to do that, but that also, I mean,
I feel like we may have brought materials up there, but I don't know whether we ran a meeting there. Yeah, I mean, I do think that I really would rely on, I would ask Ann Russack, because she definitely has a sense of the different events that are popular there, and I would ask her opinion on it, because I do think she has a good sense of the best way to reach the seniors and on their time frame where I'm not
So
intruding on
what's
whatever.
really interesting to realize here is that, January 24th is before our next board meeting.
Yeah.
So, we have to, I think what would be really helpful, it's helpful for me, I'm a kind of a visual person, is just to actually see all these dates for the next 7 weeks, like an actual physical calendar.
Yep.
January, February, this one's marked up, this one's marked up. And then we can start figuring out who can be at these, because while it was
Right, we
nice
can
to
just
have a
populate the
majority of the
calendar.
board at all the community forums, we don't have to have that.
Right.
And it may not be. It may be that some people can make these community forums, but other people can go other places, you know.
I think what we need to do is designate roles, and people are, depending who's going to be there, you know, who's going to talk about finance, who's going to talk about everything, who's going to talk about, and that doesn't have to be everybody. We just need a team of a couple, 3 people that say, who will be given definite assignments to cover what's most important.
What kind of role will the board take vis-à-vis Charlie? Because I do remember with Charlie, like, I think with the bond vote before, there was a lot of chatter about how we saw more of the board than the superintendent, and that was viewed as a negative. So, Charlie, what do you see yourself doing? How can we best utilize you?
Well, I think as mentioned, I can certainly, I've made enough of these, quite easily do the television committees. Looped around, and I think, and I've seen have big impact, and that's one thing for sure. I'm working, as you can see, in the background, like in tonight's planning. I'm happy to show up to as many of these as we can schedule.
You know, I think if we have community forums, if we're going to send something out, I think making sure we utilize the enterprise, because I think a lot of people who don't have access either to the school email or may not get the village, I've had a lot of people say to me, oh yeah, I read about it in the enterprise. It was like the first they've heard, and I think we shouldn't underestimate that there are a lot of...
Another thing maybe we didn't mention, Jeremy, is that we talked about a lot of people have said they would like to volunteer and help out. And that's something that certainly now assembled people who are serious about that. Seems to be a lot of genuine desire to help out too. And I think that group can be used in a lot of good ways, community group supporting it.
So I think we're in a good place here. In the interest of time, I'd like to keep moving unless someone has something. So we'll try to get a calendar down, some specifics, and we'll have to do some of this.
January 24th, February 6th.
Feb 6, yeah.
Thanks, Jeremy, for getting this organized with Charlie.
Yeah, thank you.
6:30.
6:30. Why don't we plan on 6:30? Yeah.
So I'll call the community center tomorrow.
Okay, so let's move on to budget update.
Can I just update you about the space meeting?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Because it's kind of bond related. So today I went to Hillside School where we met with a group that included teachers from the special areas, from representatives of all different special areas, as well as classroom teachers and the directors of special education, the Hillside principal, assistant principal, our architects, Joe. There's a big group. but I felt like it was good because a lot of different people where some of the options in terms of the immediate, some of the immediate options between now and hopefully if we're able to have the bond be successful and we add some space at Hillside, what are some of the things that we may be looking at in the next couple of years? And some of the, we've presented to the board some options because as you know, in addition to needing additional space next year for an additional section of communications class, we also found that many of the special education spaces are currently not up to compliance. Although, as we've reported to the board, nobody is going to come down here and, from the state education department, but I know that the board also, that is something that we showed to you and give you options because I know that there was people on the board that had a concern and wanted to know what the options and would be and some of the spaces were what I would say further out of compliance and some of what the impact it would have on other areas of the school. Also, part of the consideration today that I wanted not to lose sight of is for that potential third grade section moving to the fourth. And I know the board has not, and you'll see tonight in the budget update, has not made any decision on it, but I still think that as you plan it for your budget and your facilities usage space, if in fact, the board can have some time and decide what that number will be, but if that section were to continue to grow, at what point would the board want to consider splitting this section, because A, that would have an impact on what we have to plan for in our next year's budget, as well as this space planning part that we went over today. So that would have the impacts in both of those scenarios. So I think as we discussed, and Katie, is Katie still here? Yes, she is. Okay, so as we discussed all different options tonight, some of which included taking the existing cafe and either dividing that and creating a classroom space, which would then require kids to eat both in the all-purpose room, the small gym, and potentially the classrooms. It seemed as that was an option, or based on again, I'm just summarizing this, it was a very long meeting, but that one of the options was for the kids just to eat in the classrooms. And I will tell you that, again, different representatives in the room, each one had a concern about, in changing the way the schedule is currently run, which was a change that they implemented, was to ensure that the teachers at the grade level have common planning time, and all these, there were different things, like if we change this, it would affect the common planning time, and many of the classroom teachers in the room, including our special education educators, were really, that was something they were like, that's something we haven't had, and we've had it the last few years, and it's so important to our work, we feel like that can't be touched. So just to kind of get a sense of, when we looked at different spaces, the different pieces, and spoke to our speech people, and trying to come up with some creative solutions. So this is where we've landed. It looks as though the best scenario for all, what would be the best thing to potentially plan for, is to think about in the temporary time frame, to think about renting trailers for the back playground. The problem with getting them on the back playground, which is where we all think would be the most preferable area for them to be, we don't believe we can get them behind the school without bringing in a crane, which would significantly increase the cost and putting them there.
Didn't we see, Valerie, didn't you show us where you could put them in the front?
No, we could, but I'm just saying the group, as they talked, and about where people felt, and talking about teachers too, the most comfortable. It wasn't that, we knew they could go in the front. People didn't feel comfortable with that option. Again, I think that's where I think we're going to end up. So during the course of the meeting, everyone felt as though if we could get them on the back playground, the teachers felt more of a sense of security, because again, people are concerned, like, I'm going to be out in the front by myself in this classroom, so I think that the best option, if we could get them and put them back there, when we looked at the space, bringing them up that driveway in the back, they don't seem like they would not fit through that driveway. The space
Driveway to the right of
to the
Hillside.
right, to where they would have to go to get into, they would not physically fit going through that area. Oh, you did? Yeah, sure. Do you have, is that
Maureen, this
true?
would be for starting when?
So this would be for starting in September. And the reason for that is everything that we're suggesting, as the board knows, for next year would mean an elimination of 2 music classrooms, and that's not even considering that additional 4th grade section. So I think, but we do have a plan now to also retake the stage over and shift a few things around. It would still require the board to keep certain classrooms out of compliance, but as we've presented to you before, we were, in order not to not have trailers would require the music teachers to be pushing into classrooms and be on the road. And again, that has an impact on our classroom teachers as well. They're saying the way the FLES is currently delivered has an impact on their ability to do work in their classroom. So we just know that it would further be a detriment toward the music program. I mean, the instructional music space has lost, in some ways, they have space, but it's not dedicated space as it had been in the past. So, again, we looked at scenarios. Can we at least get them 1 classroom? Can we, yes, Lisa?
Oh, you said that, was Amy open to using the all-purpose room as a cafeteria again? I know everybody's been very concerned about
Well, I think we talked about putting a different floor in there, and the problem also with that is Eric Melvin, who was there representing the PE department, that would have a change in the schedule. And again, this is not, that was really one of the concerns that Amy had mentioned, at least that was what has been communicated the whole time, is that doing things and shifting the schedule runs in a way that allows, again, for this common planning time. And again, I think, Hillside is pretty tight on space, and even the different options that were laid out, which would include putting a different type of floor on top of the floor, which even if we were to say we don't care about the floor, let it get destroyed, it was also a matter of a scheduling time, and not everybody could fit in there, way the gym classes are currently run. And everyone in there seemed, many of the educators, special education, they understood about, oh, you remember we moved this, and the kindergarten has the gym. Everyone seemed to really understand the schedule, more so than I did, and that's what was the point of having all the different groups in the room, including our providers of specials, so.
Are you saying that if we used that space for lunch, that all teachers in one grade wouldn't be able to have lunch at the same time?
So it had something to do with the way the PE is scheduled also. So it's not about it's about the common planning time, and if you change one piece of it, it's like, it will have an effect. Now, the other thing that I had mentioned to the board that you could consider, and again, this is not saying it's off the table, but with bringing in a master scheduler, but again, if we were to say to them, you have to keep common planning time, all these things have to stay. And that would be, I believe, the direction, because the group of teachers, everybody in the room, they try to find out what's the most important to them. I think overall, they feel that is a non-starter,
Right.
that they need to have it at the grade level.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Maureen, common planning isn't an everyday occurrence.
It's not.
It's, I believe, a once-a-week occurrence in Hillsdale.
No, I think that, but they have prep
Is
times all at the same time also, and I think that would be affected by switching the specials. That's what the teachers at the table said. They currently have their common prep time also, which allows them for further collaboration. So those things would be, just the reality of like the way the schedule it runs. And again, that, like I mentioned to the board, if you feel uncomfortable with what is being provided from you we can, I believe that you potentially may want to look at having a master scheduler or K-12, because a lot of districts do that to ensure that they're getting the greatest efficiencies, and because none of our people here are like master schedulers, right? That's why other districts pay people to do this for them, but we could do that. I think it's going to be a significant cost, but I think in the meantime, just looking at the spaces very logically, like they're tight at Hillside, and even with all the out-of-compliance spaces, I know we keep going around, well, if we move the speech person, we do this, and again, listening to the speech teachers, and again, the board, they're not, I had mentioned, I had offered to bring a board member, I think, in fairness to them, it makes them feel clammed up a bit, but everything is important to everybody, and the speech people, you were a teacher up there, Nanisha, the speech people set the schedule for the children coming, correct? It's not the principal who sets the schedule for speech, it's based upon the schedule of the day and their caseload and when the kids are available. From my understanding, that's the way it works across the board. I didn't know how the speech people were scheduled, so when we got the speech schedules, and again, speaking to the chair of the special ed department, who is a speech person, and I shared the concerns that it wasn't being done efficiently, and they were like, this is the way it needs to be to provide the building level services. So I don't think there's any other option. At this point, you need to rent the trailers. Give everybody, if that's what.
Many trailers?
It would be 2. But again, this is a budgetary, we don't have the cost for they're asking, Joe and I looked at different options, you're looking at one, we looked at, Joe, we had talked, is Joe here? Oh, there he is.
It's a double classroom.
Right, but remember we looked at the one that you had said you would prefer to even have 2 singles put in or something if possible?
I have a representative coming out in
Yeah,
a couple of
just where they could be
Get it
placed.
up the driveway, but it's a double classroom, 70 feet by 24 feet wide.
Yeah. And this-
She has it drawn there.
So this is the size of the trailer. It was a double classroom, so basically there's one classroom here, and then one classroom here, and
We're
then
not doing
shared
anything, I just want to put it on the
space,
radar.
where there's 2 restrooms within it. So one concern, so when me and Joe were out there, we have to keep it 30 feet away from the building because there's windows up against this wall. It can't be any closer, so there's a light dashed line here that's showing the 30 feet away, and then this is the size of the trailer, and then this yellow path right here.
Give her the mic.
Is that yellow path right there is the path that provides covering, so that way the children are protected from the elements. The one concern that when me and Joe were out there checking the site is this is the size of the trailer, and then this is like a rough size of what the driveway looks like to try to maneuver the trailer to fit through this space.
And how much playground space then will the children actually have?
So they're going to lose over here the swings. They'll be cut off for the time being, and then over here is where the blacktop ends about.
So they'll have everything else, just not from almost the door over they'll be losing. So none of the equipment besides the swings.
What is the cost of the trailer along with the installation?
I have it.
Sorry.
If you were to rent them, which Joe and I had talked about even potentially purchasing them, but he said when he sees other districts do that, they just become, if we were to put them up on the Burke, he'd be afraid that they would be vandalized. So that, but anyway, but it would be approximately about $140,000 a year for 2 years.
To rent? Is that
To rent.
different than buying? How much is to purchase? That sounds like much less than what I've heard before.
Well, no, this is rent, because we talk about buying them, but there's also installation, because Joe's saying that we wouldn't do the hookup, and depending where they go, he felt, especially if they're in the back and it didn't require a lot of site work, that his guys could handle it. No, but we've always been using it, because this is the same quote we've been using. It was $300,000. I'm saying, I'm giving it to you per year, because it would be a budgetary, it would be a rental. If you were to purchase of that, it would be like we talked about $348. But we also talked about, right now we're looking at 2 classrooms. When the board had asked about it at one point, you had talked about it as being a permanent option, which would have required us to do 4. So it would have been double that cost. So we're just looking at a temporary solution as opposed to what was being suggested to get trailers to be like a somewhat semi-permanent, which would have been 4 classrooms. So I think as I listened to the concerns today at Hillside, and again, what we've presented to the board would require, without even, I believe, the 4th grade section being split, was that both music rooms, with doing a few compliance things and creating a communications class, there would be no dedicated music space in Hillside. That's what you currently have before you. That does not bring everything into compliance either. We know that. We feel that there are some that are slightly off. We've tried to minimize that with the understanding that once we have the bond, that we can bring everybody into full compliance. So I guess without putting the music teachers on the road, you would have to consider doing the rental. I think what we proposed to you was trying to stay away from that additional expense. After hearing the concerns raised at Hillside, even in terms of obviously the impact to music, but also the way it impacts everybody else in the building, it seems as though when you think about the cost of it, it's just a cost that you have to decide is 2 years of people having what they feel watered down music programming. Mike was just concerned. He's like, listen, the quality, if it was like a year, maybe we could, but like the length of time also of not having dedicated music space, they feel would be a real detriment to the program. And I think everyone in the room agreed, but there was no other solution. There was no other within taking space from other people, shifting this, putting lunch in classrooms, moving the schedule. Everyone felt as though the impacts would have to Hillside, when you think about the financial impact it would be to the budget, they appreciate that, but they feel that the impacts they would feel for a school-wide community would be far greater than the cost of that. Yes, go
So
ahead.
are 2 trailers enough?
I think 2 classrooms are enough, because what we would then do is we know that Fless would still potentially be on the road.
Okay. But that does, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding you, so that still wouldn't leave an option for increasing a class size?
Well, okay, the way it would, and this is what we're thinking, so this would now, it would, because what we would do, which was prior to us even renting trailers, we went back to looking at the stage again. So correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, we were talking about moving a classroom onto the stage. Oh, no, we're going to move OT and PT onto the stage with an office for, I think, the CPSC secretary, which then allows us to reshuffle some other classrooms, each and get another class. So by doing the trailers, by recapturing the stage and moving a couple things around, we feel that we could potentially have that classroom if needed for that additional section, and then if not, for Fless. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like an additional, but again, with just don't forget, there are some spaces that are still be out of compliance. I want to be just clear that we've brought the ones that are, in my mind, like the learning lab, which was hundreds of feet out of compliance, as opposed to 80 feet, 90 feet, where we felt as though when we saw the amount of children scheduled to be in that classroom, that although it's out of compliance, it still has enough space for what's going on in there.
Maureen, if the budget doesn't pass and we have to go back for another vote at some point.
You mean the bond?
The bond, sorry. So it could be an additional year of trailers. And what also, on another note, what happens with the space, what do you do for a stage now if you're using that space for OTPT offices?
They lose it. So if they're having any productions, they would have to be moved back down here in the interim. I would imagine, like if they're going to have a play, unless they do it on the floor of the all-purpose room, which I think would be even more problematic.
Maureen, what were the logistical arguments against having lunch in the classrooms? Because honestly, I've worked in a school as a teacher before where I had lunch in my classroom and actually found it to be quite a community building experience. So there might be logistical reasons why it won't work at Hillside, but if you could explain them.
Well, I mean,
I think there was a concern.
Can I actually jump in?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a teacher. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just know personally, much of my lunch and much of the teachers who I know, we spend our lunch working. And as much as we adore our children, having 25 kids in front of you while you're trying to simultaneously eat and get whatever planning or preparation done for right after lunch, it's very difficult. So, I mean, from a teacher standpoint, I personally wouldn't want my students in the room with me while I'm trying to prepare for the rest of the afternoon.
I think honestly, I mean, I will say that that was a concern from the teachers, but Amy also said, just even cleanliness and allergies and the way we currently able to do it, but it definitely was, I think teachers share that concern, just they use that time to do work and
community building.
Right.
We want our
Yeah.
kids with a greater population.
Maureen, can I ask you, when do we need to make a decision on this? And
Well, I wanted to update the board because, as you know, that we were going to meet, and it was actually a really great meeting, and I think everyone really added a lot of things, and I'm just giving you like really a summary of the meeting, and everything that had been brought up or discussed was really discussed, and especially with people that it impacts, and they really know the building, and they know the schedule, and they know all the impacts. They seem to have a good sense of changing one little thing and what that would do. So I wanted to put on the board's radar for two reasons, because I think as we're speaking about the budget further, although it's not, I didn't update the presentation tonight to reflect that number, but I think we need to keep in mind that we may need money set aside in next year's budget for potential for the rental of those, so that'll have to be budgeted for. And then I think as long as we have money available to us, we don't have to make any decisions. I mean, I think you do have to make a decision somewhat, because the way the plan stands right now, unless you have the fourth grade doesn't need to split and the kindergarten ends up being 5 sections, you would still have a situation where you would potentially, that would be the only scenario in which you could give the music teachers back their classrooms. And we're not, I don't know if we're confident, because as you know, that number is always moving over the summer, so I would advise the board to either plan for it, and then Joe will find out the time frame in which we would have to, cut a purchase order to do the rental of the trailer and know what the time frame is. But I wanted to know if the board supported that as like an option for the budget.
Maureen, I was told by mid-May.
Okay. Okay, so that's aligned with, that may be after our budget, but certainly if the money's there and it doesn't get spent, but I do think we have to plan for that.
And just to reiterate about the rooms that are still going to be out of compliance.
Sure.
When you said they were not hundreds of feet out of square feet.
Correct.
Okay. So were those classrooms, or were those the service providers?
I think there were a couple of classrooms also that maybe have been, like as an example, that learning lab, learning, is that what it's, I believe it's called? I think it's still slightly under, like maybe by like 40 or 50 feet. And then it was, like the psychologist rooms, the RTI suites were not being touched at all right now. The guidance counselor in the school, like a few of those offices, but I would say that the majority of the classroom spaces were, right, they were brought up.
Maureen, Veronica has something about the trailers that you may have to consider as well.
Oh, we have to get a building permit. I forgot about that, okay.
Building permit.
Building permit from the state to install them.
so if I could ask...
So I guess we might need to at least attempt to get that building permit now so that they would be available.
Yeah, I mean, so just to come back to a couple things, and then I want to make sure we keep moving, because a few other things we have to do today. I think it'd be great for you to bring a proposal about the master schedule. That's just kind of a different thing, I know, but I just think we've spoken...
No, I think it's important to look at that.
We've spoken about that in the past, and I think that's something that the board, should consider. And then, whatever specific timeline and proposal for this building permit sound like may change the timeline a little bit, maybe not. And then it sounds like we want to make, in the next month or so, a decision about the trailers, a month or two. I mean, it's going to impact the budget, so we'll need to make a decision before the budget, right?
Well, I think you're going to have to make it right, because I think where the board has to, when I show you just an update tonight, and that's why I want to have more finance committee meetings, I mean, there are a lot of things, a lot of moving parts to this budget that, you know, one has an impact on another. If the board wants to stay within a certain increase, and there are things like this that we need to add, then we need to go back to the drawing board and figure out things we need to cut, right? So all of these decisions, I feel like it's not like 10 grand, it's like $160,000. You got to let me know if you want to do it.
So correct me if I'm wrong,
You know.
but the Finance Committee, it sounds like we put this into the group of priorities that we're considering.
Yes.
And then take it from there.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I believe so.
Okay.
And just the review process at SCD is the same review process for writing the building permit.
So is there a way to do a third-party review on
I
it?
don't know if there's a third. I'm going to call tomorrow.
Okay.
Find out, yeah.
So it's possible this isn't even possible in the fall?
Find out
Okay.
tomorrow.
But I mean, even if it was something, it couldn't be the fall, but even if we get in there by January, I mean, even if we had I mean, I think the thing is, short term, I think people can sort of wing it, but I think, again, I wouldn't want to affix it to a school year. I don't want to speak for the music teachers, but I think if I said, okay, you had to go a few months push in, but by January you'll be there, I think everyone would be okay with that.
So let's
Not okay
plan
with
on,
it, but-
for the January 28 meeting, we'll have more details, and
Yep.
we'll talk about it then. Okay, great. Okay, so the budget update?
Oh, sure.
How did this revert back to?
Right behind
Okay, you did, okay. I forgot you even went up there. This is stupid. Why am I like having an issue getting? Why can't I get out of your presentation? Oh, there we go. I just kept it open from Board Docs. Okay. So tonight, this is just really a reflection of what was discussed at our Finance Committee the last time, and I just wanted to make sure that the board also kind of sees where we're at in the process, and just to give you a sense of where we are. So it's just really part of the finance report. So this is our budget calendar, which the board had adopted, and just, again, reminds everyone of the timeline that we'll be presenting different parts of the budget, with the first budget overview. And see, that's where we say, budget overview typically, I'm not saying it doesn't change, but that pretty much is going to be more or less, it may tweak, but most of the time, that's going to be your budget, you know, with some small changes. So as when we mention, oh, do we have time, like, I'm anticipating to have a more or less finalized budget as we always have by February 11th. You know, I don't think the board, like, you don't really have time to, I mean, you can add things along the way, but that's typically, you want to have a good sense of where you're at, not be like still deliberating on a lot of items. And then really the other ones are really just to go and give more detail about what's included in that budget. So the first one really should not have many changes to it. It should really reflect all that's why I asked the board, I threw out a couple dates for Finance Committee, because we need to have a budget prepared for February 11th. And then you'll see the other dates, board adopts budget hearing, and all those pieces with the required budget vote. All right, where are we? Okay. So this is just a roll forward budget. This is basically everything we have this year. There are some tweaks because it does reflect budgets that I've received in terms of the current students' placements, like in terms of special ed. So it does reflect like some changes of in that category, but in terms of staffing, it represents exactly what the staffing we have today. And by doing so, I mean, the good news is our expenditure budget, just by rolling everything forward, and I'll kind of highlight a couple of the items that either are increasing our budget, and the area in which you'll see there's a decrease in our budget, and how we ended up with a budget-to-budget increase in our expenditure plan. If we were just to kind of keep everything and not add anything, we would need another, our budget would be going up $243,000, which is a 0.48% increase budget to budget. But as you look at the other side of the equation, the revenues, and this is something I've been talking to the board about, and I think the board understands, not only do you have to wean yourself off the reserves, you're going to have to, because the amount of money you have in reserves is going down. So because of that, just even to support with the tax dollars a budget-to-budget increase of $243,000, you would still be required to increase your property tax levy by $846,000, which is a 2.07% increase to our levy. Actually, the resulting tax rate increase, because we, again, have another increase in our assessed valuation in town, the actual tax rate would still be almost close to a 2% negative increase. If your taxes from this year to next year were, like if your assessment were not to change, and this year to the next year's tax bill, you would in fact, your taxes would in fact go down, which has nothing to do with us as much as has to do with increased evaluation in other parts of the town. So I just wanted to remind everybody that we are subject to the tax cap calculation, or we attempt to stay under the tax cap that is provided to us by the state. And just to kind of walk you through, you begin when you do the calculation with your prior year levy, which was the $40,850,000 number. We again, from the state, receive from ORPS, which is the Office of Real Property Services. They looked at the town valuation. They calculated that we are, in fact, in addition to the 2% CPI increase, that Hastings would also have an allowable 1.49% increase of a growth factor, which again is given to us by them, and this is what we're required to calculate our tax growth off of. And then there's other things that go into the formula, such as pilots, which we have, and it's an add-in on one side. You have to add it in onto both sides because they're separate from your tax base. So it's that, the capital levy. We can get more into how each of those are calculated at a future board meeting, but just for purposes of tonight, I just wanted to show you by doing this calculation and assuming, which we know CPI is running above 2%, what this means is that we would be, under the tax cap formula, allowed to levy an additional $1.4 million worth of taxes and still be tax cap compliant. I just wanted to do that. Currently, we're suggesting a tax levy increase on a rollover budget of $846,000. So currently we are, in our rollover budget scenario, we're $588,000 below our allowable tax cap. Now, these are just some budget factor summaries. So what is driving our increases in our budget are contractual staff salary increases, which are negotiated. We do have some retirement savings that we're calculating into this. We have some of our staff that is retiring at the end of this year. Unfortunately, we saw a very large health insurance increase of 7%, which is, that's the number. It's not me guessing what it may be. That is actually what our health insurance provider gave to us, is they voted upon it, that's going to be the increase starting July 1st. Thankfully, the teacher's retirement rate actually did drop from a current rate of 10.62%, which we're paying on all teacher salaries, to we anticipate between a 9 to 9.5 increase. I think the budget I did use, I have to see, I think I might have used something in between that number. I'll have to go back, but that, again, that's provided to us by the state. And then our expenditures, we also, what's reflected in what you're seeing, where we're seeing a reduction of our out-of-district busing runs, and that's based on our actual costs this year. We had some students who are left the district. We were able to, with our counterparts, consolidate some of the runs. So we are seeing a budget-to-budget decrease in our out-of-district busing.
Maureen?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just want everybody to understand about our out-of-district busing, because it's something we've discussed and I don't think that people are aware. So just so everyone understands, when somebody goes to a school that's not ours, be it special education, be it just an election to attend a private school, depending on how far away it is, we must pay for it, and it's quite costly. So as an example, last year we had 3 students attend the master's school, which is only 2 miles away, but the busing cost to us was $45,000. We had 3 children attending Irvington. The busing cost us, I believe, was $55,000. So these are, depending on some are cheaper, some are more expensive.
It really has to do with the amount of kids on them and how many buses, and depending upon, so you can have a year where the same bus run could go, one year could be $1,000, the next year could cost you $15 for the same student, depending on the other kids on the run. So,
but just so people understand where this is coming from.
Because I guess the board was concerned that they didn't.
Money, but often it can cost us more if a child elects to go to Riverdale.
Right.
It can cost
if we have no other students going there
much more.
Right, that's true. But again, so you'll see here that what we have, in fact, our current budget, we're going to be less next year in terms of our out-of-district busing costs. So in terms of revenue, where we're seeing some positive variances, also, as everyone knows, the interest revenue is going up, and because our budget, we were keeping a very conservative level of funding, we are able to increase that number significantly for next year in terms of what we anticipate with interest. And then we also, this year, actually, our special ed department got some additional students to come from other districts that we typically hadn't sent us students, so we anticipate also having some additional revenues for those, from those other out-of-consortium districts for next year as well. So that also is an offset in our budget, that we're realizing some additional tuition revenue we didn't anticipate. So again, just to give you, we'll just go over this really, really quick. This is just a snapshot. We can talk about it at another meeting further if people don't want to get too much into it right this evening, but this is just a snapshot of where our reserves, our fund balance and our reserves were from 16, 17, and 18, and what we're anticipating them to be at the close of business June 30th, 2019, and the close of business June 30th, 2020. And as you can see in this scenario, as the district continues to use money either to meet obligations with tax certiorari settlements and also to use those funds to offset expenses in the budget, we have we've been able to sort of maintain somewhat of our level of reserves, but we need to pull ourselves and be less reliant on those, because eventually we've seen that with other districts where if they continue to be using the reserves and are unable to replenish them, then you end up with big budget deficits in years following. So this is just a snapshot, and this is based upon what we anticipate our end-of-year fund balance projection to be. You'll see in here that with the additional savings we've received this year, the recommendation will put that money into the capital funds projects, capital reserve, because as we know, although this bond is fairly large and we're getting a lot of work done, there were quite a number of other projects, including 4 other elevators in this building that we have some concerns about, that we want to ensure that we have money, because if one of those goes, we have to replace it, and they're about $400,000 each. So again, that's the recommendation. We can, just wanted to give you that quickly. So these are things that are not included in that snapshot of where the rollover budget is. And these are just basically, I tried to order them based upon, in asking the principals, they do have some kind of priority based upon the order you see them tonight, based upon when I've asked for some feedback. And again, we'll have additional, they may change slightly, but this was based upon where the principals gave me. So at Hillside, you'll see that, again, there may be, well, that one I think I might have added at the end, so that may not be a priority. But as much of a priority as the other things, but I actually added that top line. So additional section of 4th grade, you'll see what we would have to plan to have another teacher in for that scenario. Amy did put in for a math AIS teacher, because I guess currently they have reading AIS, but they don't currently have a person in math at the building. So again, you'll see the reflection. And sometimes you'll note that some of the FTE costs, although it's 1 FTE, depending on a person to do that work, they probably would be more expensive than a classroom teacher, because they would have a level of expertise that would be a little bit more costly. Then we see there's a proposal to add 3 additional ICT sections at Hillside, and I do have numbers Lisa had requested. We're going to be presenting that at a future meeting. We want to show you what our current level numbers are, what our what other counterparts are, and just to kind of, go over, we're going to get it into more detail. I just wanted everyone just to see this, but we'll absolutely provide a lot more additional details with enrollments and rationale for each of these. But again, based upon the numbers and some of the anticipated kids coming in, it looks as though there will be a need for additional ICT classes at Hillside. We also, as we've been talking about, we anticipate having a communications class being brought back to Hillside, and you'll see not only is there a teacher in those classes, there's also typically a teacher assistant and a teacher aide. So you also see that reflected there. Middle school, yes. Sure. We do. And that's actually factored in the other side of on the other side of the budget. Now, there is a potential we even receive more, because we will have more spots, and I know that they're currently, our leadership in special ed, when they attend their meetings, what they do at that time is they present, we have this program, and they speak to their counterparts to, make sure that they're aware that we're also able to accept additional students into that program. In the middle school, you'll see that the priority here is for a special education teacher to work as an ICT teacher in foreign language classrooms. So that's the priority there. It's something that they don't currently have ICT foreign language, and that's something they're looking potentially to add. Then additional guidance counselor, which would be, it would be a transition counselor. So it would be mainly, that individual's position would mainly be focused on kids coming from 4th to 5th grade, and then also going from 8th to 9th grade. That would be kind of their primary focus. A .2 reading specialist. I will show you that this is kind of coupled with the high school's .8. We currently have one .0 reading specialist who is working .8 in the middle school and .2 at the high school. What they're looking for is to have that person work 1.0 at the middle school, and then you'll see in the high school, so it would be an additional reading teacher. So part of it would be, middle school, and one part would be high school. They feel that they're now more prepared to have a full-time person in the high school to provide that service. They're also .6 E&L increase. Again, we'll get into more of this. This is a non-mandated. This is not a required increase, but this is what they feel would give our students who are E&L students additional support that they believe they need. But again, I just want to be clear, it's not like a legal requirement. It's more they feel that it would be helpful to different students that are in need of additional support. District. This is one, as the board is aware, you do currently have a person who's serving as a .2 diversity coordinator for the district. This was a proposal that was also presented last year, and again, you'll see now that there's a .8 because we already have a .2, so that would be making it a full-time diversity coordinator position that would be servicing at the district level. And I have additional bus runs on here, and we'll speak about that not tonight, but in another time, because this really couples with the idea of the safety. We're currently looking at safe routes to school, and one of the proposals that had come up, and I just wanted to put on here not to lose sight of it, it had been brought up before that if we had more busing for our middle school students, then we wouldn't have, it would probably alleviate a lot of the issues that they're having with students like walking from High Street in different areas. So that was something that had been, as part of that discussion, a proposal like with the district. I mean, our transportation director is even seeing the feasibility of it, and that would take a lot, but I just wanted to put it out there because it is something that would alleviate some of those concerns. Okay, and I guess that's it. So there are some talks of, we've identified some areas that, at each building, we've asked everybody if you wanted to, if in fact you really felt you needed something, would there be something else you could give up in order to get, let's say the math IAS teacher at Hillside. So there have been different proposals that have come to me, but I think we want to run those by the Finance Committee because, of course, anytime we talk about cutting, it's talking about cutting other jobs, right? So we want to be really sensitive and thoughtful about, how much, is that what the board, is that the direction you're going to go in? Like, you want to stay under the tax cap increase, we don't want to increase anymore? Because without a clear direction on how much money you want to spend, I don't want to start going out and proposing that we're going to cut people, because that's what it really comes down to. There's not a lot of other money we have available to us. I know people suggest our copiers and our paper, but even if we were to do that, that's like $40,000. That's not going to solve what you see above you, in front of you tonight.
Maureen, are we still, and thank you for all of this, and I know, I was the one who bugged you about the bus routes, so I want to say, kudos, excellent work. Are we still also continuing to try to find more efficiency in the bus routes with the centralized locations?
We are, but that one too, it's really, obviously, we put it out there, and I think there's, like everybody else, a lot of the other districts also have been working on doing bonds and things like our counterparts in Irvington. I think that, I'm hoping that those meetings will take place in the next month or so. I think there's a willingness to look at it, and we've put it to our bus transportation coordinator that is something we want to look at to see what, again, just to see what it looks like. What are some proposals that could make us a little bit more efficient without cutting busing per se?
And I think, as we talk about where do we want to be, over the cap, under the cap, I think we do have to look at it in terms of the bond as well. If the bond should pass, we're starting out at a 2.5% hike. So I think we have to look on how much we can put on top of that.
It definitely can, when I say the February 11th date, but I think also we can't be where we are tonight, these are proposals, and we're just still where's everybody at? I think there's got to be a point that, I mean, maybe at this point, the board assumes that maybe that's a factor, and then gives the finance committee, who is one wing of the board, like some direction, because I think in different years, we've set the tax cap as, like, as long as you're under the tax cap, we're good, kind of a thing. Because as you can see, I didn't anticipate, I don't think, Charlie, either after last year's adding of staff, and I'm not saying they don't need the staff, but this is actually a longer, there's actually more requests, and this doesn't even include non-personnel requests, such as technology and some very costly items. I mean, we're talking about almost, I think now, all totaled, and it doesn't even include that technically ICT classrooms always have teacher assistants, which I haven't even included. So, I mean, we're talking about, we could be at 1.7 million just with requests, and each of them have a very compelling reason of why they need it. But I think right now, you see where you are, you see reserves. You really only have, at best, even to stay under the tax cap, $500,000, and some of which will now potentially include a trailer. You know what I mean? So really, you're looking at potentially funding 2 to 3 of these positions at best. And I think, we need to have some, I mean, if you want to stay under the tax cap, and if you don't, I think you'd have to get a super majority. And I don't think it would be the right reason, because to Lisa's point, and I mean, I know Nanisha's mentioned also, there's a concern about the overall spend. And I think this actually, a bond is a finite amount of time. All these other things are sort of not, you own for life, right? So these actually have a larger impact on the budget long-term than sometimes a bond does, quite frankly. Because the bond, you're going to have to repair things regardless. That's not like a choice not to do your roof. But these kind of adding programs are things that you have to really think about the long-term effect in terms of our long-term budget. So I guess we're going to have a finance committee the next time, but I think the board does, maybe at one point you should have a conversation about where you see yourself, because I think right now, the finance committee, I don't know if you're all aligned on where you want to be, but I think I'm kind of showing you where it's at, and we need to go back to our building principles, and I've been where, the board will say, well, let's cut things, and then if people come, and then, like, you're not going to want to cut it. So I don't want to, like, start putting people on the chopping block to get things, if in fact, like, are we looking to, like, not increase it all and keep at the rollover, or are we willing to go up higher?
I mean, I don't think the board has discussed that yet.
Right, but it has to happen at one point.
But I do think that members of the board have had the very high level, at least qualitative conversation about, we're doing a bond, and there is obviously a lot of economic anxiety for a whole host of reasons we don't have to go into here. And, my sense, and anyone on the board chime in if you think this isn't accurate, is, and I've had the sense that the finance committee has been kind of keeping this sense, or this is the self-mandate they gave themselves, was figure out how to be pretty conservative and at the same time serve our needs, and figure out how to make some of those trade-offs. And, my sense, just from some early conversations with people in the finance committee, is that's been some of the conversations you're thinking about having.
But that was prior to us getting almost $2 million worth of requests. So I think, look at this. The great thing about this rollover budget is we did a great job. We have everything intact without making one cut, and we're only spending I mean, I'm not saying only, but on a $50 million budget to only increase $243,000, that was kind of good, and we were actually in a very comfortable, position. Wow, we can keep everything. We're not looking at needing to cut. And then, obviously there's things that happen at the building level. They know there's kids that are in need of different services, and then they present a list, and each one of them, including like even the different non-mandated things that have been presented, there's a lot of reasons that, that people want them. But I guess we'll need to have a conversation at one point, and maybe the finance committee can give the directive the next time, because we do need to go back to the building level people and have an understanding of what's the tolerance of where you're going to be at. Because I think that we understand that. I agree. I think we have to be very careful about the budget growth at this point, because to be able to sustain it long term, like even if we could pull it off this year, I don't know if we're not going to be able to keep adding and sustaining, because then eventually you will have a big budget gap. That's the other piece.
So I'm assuming the finance committee feels as though you're going to keep having these conversations and keep, because I think that's the place where some of these tough trade-off conversations, at least that's the place for them to start, where they get generated. And then I'm assuming the January 28 meeting back here will have a further, and again, anyone.
That'll have to, right. It'll have to be at that point, because I said by February 11, we should be presenting you a budget that includes more or less, unless there's something you want to add at the last minute, we'll have our state aid number, a preliminary state aid number by next week. That's when they release the initial state aid numbers. Although you would assume, just because some areas of our state aid go up, some of it may go down, because there's things that are expenditure-driven aids, and if we spent less the previous year, we're going to get less in aid. So we're anticipating a 2.8% increase in state aid, which again is based upon the fact that we're getting that much state aid this year. I don't know what that will look like. I think we will have to be smart and understand there's going to be no big windfall from the state of New York in terms of aid. I think the good news is we were very fortunate this year to have a decrease in our TRS. Without that, that was like a $350,000 savings, and with the reduced bus routes, we would be right now $500,000 or $600,000 higher than we are right now, what we're showing. So I know that the TRS, I was on a conference call with them, and you could look it up yourself, they're not anticipating a cut next year. So we're not going to have that $300,000, kind of comfort to take care of that huge health insurance increase we're experiencing. So that's it. So just wanted to make sure, because the board was like up to speed, because there are definitely a lot of requests coming in, and we're going to have a lot of work, more work this year than we even had last year in terms of requests.
I think you raised it, and as a finance committee, we've yet to really see it. What do the buildings want to give up or are comfortable giving up to satisfy these requests? Right? Like that's, I think, with the starting premise of a rollover budget, and that a rollover budget does reflect contractual raises and step movements. So it's not a flat dollars. It is a stepwise increase. It's clear that that list of items is outside of the financial wherewithal of the district. I think it's pretty straightforward. So then, recognizing that reality, it's wonderful to have a list that gives us some visibility as to what the asks are. But the second half of that list needs to be delivered by the buildings if those items on the list are important, how can they be self-funded?
Right.
And then we have points of discussion, because just having a list of what's wanted as relevant and worthwhile and necessary as they are, unless we're going to make decisions where we're prioritizing one school above another, one request above another, which I don't.
Well, you might have to do that, because I think, because
as
looking at the ICT numbers, what I've seen, there's kids coming back to district, and I don't know how you're not splitting those sections.
Which we may need to do, and ultimately winds up being.
We have to. At a certain percent. There's like a couple things in here that we're going to present to the board like a whole, because there were some questions about the way the ICT and how we compare it to other districts. But I can tell you that in terms of, we have a drop in out-of-district tuition that is, in some ways, I kind of struggled on whether I should just put the ICT teacher in there, because in order to get the kids back to district, you have to split some of the, like 2 of those ICT classes at Hillside to me are, it would be keeping with, we don't go up to 12 in our ICT classrooms, and that, to my understanding, nobody does. You work in Ardsley, so you would know that. So, it would be keeping with like how we typically split them, but we'll present that information. But I can say that right now, it's not about prioritizing, but I think there are times that, maybe, like, let's just even pretend it was the high school. There may be a need to spend $1 million at the high school one year, but make everybody else cut $300,000, because it's enrollment-driven, it's program-driven, and it can't be like, okay, you can keep everything you have, right? So I think,
right now,
but I want to make sure that's the directive that the board feels like we should go in.
To the point of spend $1 million here, cut $300,000 here, we're not getting any suggestion as to where the cut $300,000 comes from.
Well, I have some, but I don't want to say them.
You have some.
No, I've gotten some from the principals, but I think they want to make sure, because we've done this before, and you have to understand that unless the board, that's really the directive you want to go in, it creates a lot of hard feelings when you're talking about cutting teachers and cutting people's jobs.
As the finance chief, do you think we have the wherewithal to fund that list of requests? Right. So if we can all agree that we don't have the wherewithal, then there's really nothing to discuss other than get the list of, where we're going to fund them.
So I think to your point, Tim, should be a good example. I think you said maybe the committee might decide that we can only afford half of the things that were asked. If that were the number, I don't know, or whatever you want to make it. I think...
I mean, I think at the best, it could only be
Right now, it looks like
500.
a third.
Yeah,
It
it's
looks like a third. We have
not
less
even
than a third.
yeah,
I think
less than.
And that's not factoring, sorry, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
sorry.
No, I just want to finish that thought. I
Yeah.
think that what's needed here is a limit that needs to be set by the committee, and then you can work off of something.
Right, I
And
think that's
You
kind
can
of-
make the tough choices, and it's just the reality.
Right.
I have to say, coming back, it was great to come back here to see all the great positions and so forth this fall, and see, ambitious ideas for next year. It's not happening in most schools right now.
No.
It's not. People have to understand that. It's the reality.
Are there ways to, and you had mentioned that we have some classes at the high school that are like 3 kids and...
Well, I said that, right, we were talking about when we look at the district, I think when a board is trying to make, decisions, you should probably look at everything you're doing, right? Because I think if you look at something in isolation, whether it be anything, I mean, it could be something at the elementary school, that's why it's important, about looking at what your ICT numbers are. I don't know, I think there's a rationale for why they split it. Legally, you can go to 12, right? 12, you can have 12. Now, I know nobody does that, and we'd never have done
Weren't you
that.
just talking about regular elective
No,
classes?
we were, but I'm saying when you look at some of
question
the,
was-
so there was looking at some of the music and art offerings at the high school, and when we were looking at it in terms of looking at what we were currently offering, when we were revamping our music rooms here, we were starting to look at the loads in the classroom, and many, as people are aware, at the high school level, you do offer music classes that may have 4 and 5 kids in them. And again, I think that in order to do a proper analysis of what, if you have ICT classes at the middle school that you need to run, if you need to divert, I do believe that the board should do a thorough analysis of how you spend your money, not on a year to year, because there are times if you're trying to make trade-offs. I'm not saying, and we would ask the building principals to do that evaluation, and then if there were things there are other districts we talked about was class sizes. Class sizes are mandated, like in Dobbs Ferry, they may say, we won't run a class without 12 kids in the seat. That's it. They don't care what it is.
What is the board not asking the principals to do that's an analysis they should be doing?
Well, I don't know if that's the direct, we've been fortunate that we have been able to fund our budget requests within our, whatever money we have available. I guess now in seeing how large the requests are this year and hearing this one, we need the readings, but all these different things, how do you say no to, there was many things that seemed to be very well thought out. I just want to be clear that if the board, if that's the direction, if you really need this, the board is asking you, then you need to cut something else at your building to fund for that position.
I think the thing that's hard for us as a board having this conversation right now is we don't know that. We don't.
But I'm saying that you want
But I guess what I'm saying is to I can't remember who brought it up, but maybe you brought it up, Maureen. If it's $1 million here, maybe it's $300,000 taken from every other school. The thing that's hard, does the master schedule potentially help with this conversation?
Well,
I imagine.
I think part of this is also a symptom of not having an assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction who's really overseeing the programmatic choices that align all 3 buildings. And I think once we have that kind of supervision and oversight to not only the learning, but then the costs of that learning, I think we'll be in a much better position to be making these
We're at a
decisions.
rollover budget to the absolute best of our ability. We went up $2 million last year.
Yeah, I know.
The year-on-year change from the 17-18 year to 18-19 year was significant, and we did it in a reflection of satisfying, I think,
There's a lot of mental,
there was a tremendous amount of sort of
A lot of increase in special education.
Well, there
backlog.
was also a lot of the RTI, both the math coaching, the reading, and personnel, so they're only building level. They're really not for special ed. I'm saying the things we had last year, I think were responsible for
Well, can I just jump in? It's getting really late here.
But actually, Doug, I just had a question from the Finance Committee. What might be helpful for us, rather than just say, stop it, if Lou says, I need another ENL teacher here part-time, and he needs it, and the same with Gail, with the guidance counselor, maybe the principals could meet with the Finance Committee, and we could hear directly from them.
I just want to figure out how do you do it with a rollover budget, and tell me what you. We just went up by $2 million last year, right? We went up by 5.7%, and we sort of sat behind the fact that the assessment went up a ton.
Right.
And so, listen, there's a lot of moving parts last year that seemed like the right way to go. Now, in this period where we don't yet have assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction, I think, beginning to see collectively the importance of a master scheduler, looking at 5-person classes, 6-person classes, et cetera. I don't see, speaking personally, figure out a way to do it with rollover or something very close there too. Particularly, if we're talking about a couple $100,000 worth of trailers as being basic necessities because of class space.
I mean, we had talked about this sort of flat budget challenge, and
I mean, I think that we've made it because 243 is a flat budget.
but to your point, I mean, you know, I know that you know, everything that's on this list, it's felt like we definitely need it, but the reality is that we can't afford everything. Everything.
No, and I think to Lisa's point, like honestly, like when I'm presenting to you is like every single person has a really good reason, but I think it needs to also to break down. There may be, I think we have to look at each thing individually. So there's going to be the ICT numbers, which are predicate, but I mean, to get kids back to the district, there may be some of that staff in my mind that is not like so much as you saying, oh yeah, we can do it or not do it. There's actually a direct correlation of reduction in tuition costs that goes hand in hand with the additional need to hire teachers. So I just want to be clear that maybe a few of those teachers that when we get into discussion that without doing that, you would then just be adding money back to tuition because you're going to need to add the staff to get the kids back to district, including aides, because there's one of those aides is a 1-to-1 for a child coming back to district. So there are certain things I just want to be clear that I believe between that and the trailers, you're going to have to add in. I do think each principal, I can tell you I was surprised by the amount of requests, but each one of them is very well thought out and there's a compelling reason. I guess what I need to do, because all I do is add it up, if the board feels strongly that you want to land at a certain tax rate, we need that information so we can go back and say to people, we only could levy X amount of dollars. That's, I guess, the piece that I'm looking for, because I'm not trying to make decisions. I don't know
we're going to get there. I think, but I do think there's this idea of flat, maybe up to 1%, because you know, I don't know. I mean, if the finance committee could work in that 0 to 1% range, as I think that just feels good based on the conversations we've been having. Yeah, but
just to repeat, and then let's move on. Going up to the maximum levy leaves us unless I'm missing what you're saying, Maureen, leaves us $500,000 of margin right now.
That's it. Even if you went to the max, you still don't have enough.
So what we're really talking about is if we're going above that $500,000 of margin, it's going above the tax cap. I don't think anyone at this table is discussing going above the tax cap.
No, that's what I'm saying.
So if we're not talking about that, then there's $500,000, which means this list of requests isn't manageable relative to $500,000. And it's not even that we have $500,000 because we already know that there's
other
demands on that. So it gets back to, if you want things on this list, what can you give up to get things on this list? And that's the message. And I'm not trying to be
hard to know if there's any other message.
I would tweak it because maybe, you know, let's say, I won't even name a school. We have school 1, 2, 3. Maybe the needs at school 1 really are urgent, and maybe school 2 should abandon all its requests. Like, I guess I'm not saying that it necessarily has to be building has to balance its own budget, basically. We should look at the district.
Okay,
but that's what I think I was saying, because I think there's certain things that I see that there's no way you can say to them, well, you're going to have to cut to get it, because if they have kids coming in that they have to hire teachers for, you can't say to them, oh, well, ICT, you got to cut, you know, or to get that. Like, that would be...
But can I ask, it's getting really late, and I don't think we're going to get too much progress on this topic right here.
But you're going to ask the same thing I am.
So, if the Finance Committee could go back and have these conversations about where that, you know, here's the analysis we've done about what it looks flat, what it looks, where we can go, why you started doing that, you've all started doing that a little bit. I think that these are really tough conversations to have when you look at those lists. A rationale and some thinking. Maybe if it means you pick up, each member of the Finance Committee picks up the phone and talks to individual board members, just says, here's what we're thinking, and just does some of this work. I think this is going to be really hard work for us to do here in public, like, all trying to do it all at once. I think we have to start to evolve it so when we get here, we can have portions of the conversation that are a little bit more evolved. But I think we're all generally in the same place. We're doing a bond. We asked for a lot last year. We needed that because of the special ed lawsuit and a variety of other things, so we had to do it. We were lucky that we were able to. We've got a lot of tenuous financial things going on right now. Let's just pull that together. And I think Lisa makes a great point. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's building by building, right? I mean,
No,
it's,
okay.
right.
So
that's what I was
this will
saying
be
before.
this will be
Can't
my
do it that way.
this is my final comment on this.
You said that, Maureen.
This is-
Maureen said that.
Okay, this is my final comment on this, though. Maureen's made a very good point about the communication class and the needs associated with that and the costs associated with that. I do need some direction as a finance committee member from you, Charlie, and you, Maureen. I don't anticipate that building leaders within
we'll know that.
other schools will say, I would like to prioritize this school. I would like to prioritize not my school in lieu of the three things I have in my school. I can tell you from my own personal feel, but we really shouldn't be making budget decisions on Tim Bear's feel. So I'd like some guidance from a 30-year veteran with curricular expertise. This is how I would prioritize this list, because then when we go for the asks, I can be informed about when we approve some of those off the list. So it just, right now, this is good. It's prioritized within the school, but that means it's prioritized by building leadership. So now I need an aggregate priority, maybe with your...
With input from building
Well, I think
leadership.
there was things that I was saying, because there's different things that, to me, are going to be, again, we'll have an ICT conversation, but it's going to be mandated, right? So I try to explain to you that this is a non-mandated ask, but they think it would be great. But I can tell you that when they prioritized it, they dropped, right, the E&L as an example, because they felt as though that would give us additional support. But they wanted us to be clear that we're already providing the children with the mandated level of support, but this would be an additional. So I think we need to prioritize in terms of what I would say is and again, just so to clearly, I know I'm using Hillside because I know for a fact that some of those kids, some of those positions are, in order to get the kids back out of district, you're going to have to hire those kids. So those, to me, sort of are, I mean, I don't know, but it seems to me there's not a lot of flexibility there. And like if a child has an IEP, has a one-to-one aid, like, I'm giving it to you like that's a new staff member, but is it a choice? But I wanted to make sure that you understood that it would be something new. So I will go back and try to prioritize those again, but you can see my concern because the difference between what we have and what is being asked is a lot larger than what we were facing last year. And I know that the board has, the directive I was given by the Finance Committee was to have a zero-based budget, which I think is, this rollover is as close to zero as possible.
Wait, Maureen, it didn't come from, you had recommended that, but I don't think that we
And
had
Tim,
decided as a
probably,
fund.
right?
I don't know,
Tim, did
because
you?
Tim, we had discussions about bringing it up a bit so that we don't, to raise our basis if we need. I don't think there was a decision by the Finance Committee on that.
No, I think the basic gist of, there's the zero growth challenge as just as a general concept. It's not been an operating directive, but simply starting as a building block of the budgeting process with a rollover, and then this rollover basically informs everything, such that north of the rollover we only have $500,000 of margin, and then everything else builds, I think, from those two pieces.
Okay, so from a process perspective, you got 2 more meetings before the 28th? Okay, so, let's keep working these concepts that have come up as a finance committee, and, we'll have further conversations on the 28th.
And I just want to spell out, because I know you talked about having the discussions in the public meeting, and I think you meant here, this sort of meeting, but I do want to clarify that our Finance Committee meetings are public. We've been holding them in the early evening hours, so it's easier for people to come. So I just wanted to make sure we're
And that was, I mean, not that I think that is good, but my concern also, I think that is good that we have them. I actually like having them as a board of a whole because I felt like there were community members who actually were more knowledgeable than the board members, and some of them actually took our documents for the last time, which I guess because I have them available for the board members, I have to give them to everybody, but it kind of puts the rest of the board at a disadvantage when you're having them there. So I would say if we're going to have finance committees, and although they were always welcome and open to the public, my concern is that there were people in the public now that are more knowledgeable and hearing those conversations prior to even being able to discuss them with the board as a whole. So that's the reason I had this presentation for tonight, because I know that there was a person in the community that I know has already shared that information with other people that knew more about what I just showed you tonight than you knew. So that's a problem. And especially as we're talking about reductions in staff or potentially doing this, I really believe that the Finance Committee, we're going to be having conversations, but that's why I was trying to say, but at one point the board, because we're going to have another meeting, people are going to show up, and all the conversations that'll happen in there, you're not going to know about until we come back. So
I guess, and if there's a takeaway, recognize how tight it is.
Yeah.
And that the conversations within the Finance Committee are going to address head-on how do you manage operating within...
And I mean, we gave a list last year to the Finance Committee, which included, things like everything was on the board, assistant coaches, everything, and we talked about potentially, looking at that. But again, I don't want to create issues and then, we go down a path and then, there's going to be a million reasons why we don't want to do it. So I just want some clear directives because it is hard to look at a 1.6 or it's probably more close to $1.8 million ask and then have no direction of where you really want to end up.
Okay, so we'll keep working on that and talk more on the 28th and talk in the ensuing weeks. We've got 3C as assistant super of curriculum instruction update. I don't know if we have to say too much about that right now.
Well, I would just say that we've actually been soliciting
Can you use the microphone? Yeah.
Sure. We've been in touch with the various school districts, asking them to give us the model of the assistant superintendent position that they follow, and we've been getting in different job descriptions. And as those come in, we're going to be looking at it more closely, and in terms of what might best fit the needs here, keeping the board informed as we go along. And once we have the description that we're looking for, we'll be sharing that in terms of then identifying the qualities that we need to find in the people who might be out there to fill those needs. So this is just the start-off point, but I think we've made some good progress.
So when's the hope that we would be able to start advertising for that?
Oh, I should think not in the too distant future at all. I mean, it's a matter of a few weeks perhaps, but clearly before we jump into it, we wanted to come up with a job description that everybody could buy into, and I like the idea when we do that phase and we can share it with everybody and get input, then we'll really know what we're looking for, and doing it properly, that's the way I think we should proceed.
When do you anticipate having an ad go up, and how long of a window do you anticipate?
Well, we've done, actually, Lynn, who you may know works in our office, does a great job, and she's already made many contacts, institutional contacts and school contacts, and gotten the word out there by word of mouth. And so, in a sense, we've already started to make, as a matter of fact, I was at a superintendent's meeting this past week, and I announced it to the group that we're in the market, please let us know. I have a bite that came out of that, and I'm going to do the same thing at a meeting I'm going to, a superintendent's meeting on Friday. So we're getting the word out there, and we'll continue to do that and build on that with some formal, and we do have set up, as soon as we get the job description more clearly defined, we'll be ready to go into advertisement mode as well.
I'm sorry, Charlie, I'm glad that it's putting out, but I was just asking a specific question. What's your goal about getting an ad up?
Getting, what? Say again, please?
What's your goal as to a date, as to when we have an ad up and how long it stays open?
Well, I should imagine in 3 to 4 weeks.
3 to 4 weeks from now.
But I just think that the point of it is that we really want to know what the job description is before we start shopping around. But, maybe I'm being too slow. Maybe we could do it more quickly. I mean, realistically, within the next few weeks, we'll have ads running everywhere, and we'll be in a good position. We'll be in a good position. We're still in January, after all.
I will say this. I think job descriptions, I don't know that people pay a ton of attention to every single line in a job description. I think they're going to see assistant soup of curriculum in Hastings. We can continue to define what we want in a job, but I don't know that we have to have it all nailed down, because I don't think that that's what... If people are going to see the title, that's what's going to get them to apply.
I think it's very important. I think because you will find in these job descriptions a wide variety of what is there, of what really want to make sure that's what you're looking for. And I really would like the Board of Ed to sign off on that.
I agree with that. I actually agree with that, Lisa, with what Charlie's saying.
I just don't see that it's nailed down in the ad itself, but that's what's... Okay. I'm just concerned that as we go farther down the road, Pelham just put up an ad, we're going to be losing potential people.
Is Pelham looking for an assistant superintendent for... My gosh, I never thought he'd leave there. Well, there you go.
Okay, so we'll hear from you in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we'll keep you
Okay.
informed. We'll have an update, and maybe something more significant to report at next meeting.
Okay. There's something attached here, which is just a quick update. It's kind of a working document, 3D, that I sent to the board about just our goals, what we're working on. We won't go through it here, but that's in the actual agenda as an add-on. So I'm going to move to the business items.
Wait, Doug, sorry.
Yeah.
Before we do that, I did want to make a comment. One was just on our process. This is an item that was added about an hour and a half, about 2 hours before the board meeting. And I know that's not anybody's intention, but it's just, I don't think we should do that unless it's an emergent issue, because nobody has time to read it, and it's just, it puts us all at a disadvantage. And the letter that's attached, has a lot of good detail in it, but it has some information that I know that I had written back and had an issue with, as did Nanisha. So I don't think that this letter in its current form should be the message to the community, that there were things that we sent back that never made its way in here. So
I just, now that you've brought it up, I'll raise a point around that. I believe what we've taken on as a board this year is an unbelievable amount of work. It is insane. From looking for an assistant superintendent of curriculum, bond, budget in the current financial environment, special ed audit. I mean, you would not recommend taking this level of work on. I think the struggle that we have had as a board is keeping the community informed. And I think one of the big struggles we've had in keeping the community informed is writing together tight documents that articulate everything perfectly. It's a killer. It's an absolute killer. And as someone who's done change management for 20 years, I can tell you that when you get into that massive, complex change world, that what you do is you do your best to show in-process work what you're doing so people can see what you're doing. That's what I've tried to do here. And I mean, I have to say, all I ever do as a board president is do my best to try to show process, to be transparent, to not be perfect, to show, and decisions that I try to make as a board president, when I'm doing that, are decisions that, if it's a big decision, everyone is getting checked in with. If it is something that, if I can say in my heart of hearts, this will advance things and does not have anything that is too tricky or too challenging, but you may have some small problem with it, anyone on the board, I have to make an executive decision to say, we got to move. And that's what we're doing here. And that's why I've put that up. And I feel, and I'm just going to, man, do you know how much willpower it takes up here sometimes to just keep it together? I can't even tell you how much willpower it takes. But I am someone who's got 3 children. I am someone who's working a full-time job and has dedicated their time to this community, to this school board, and I feel like I am questioned on a daily, weekly, monthly basis on everything I'm doing, and I got to tell you, it doesn't feel good. I put that up as an opportunity to show the community where we are in process. That's why it's there. And I do not feel anyone from the board wrote back and said, egregiously wrong, whoa, way out of the... If that was the case, we would have said something. However, I think it's an accurate depiction of the work this board, the tough work this board has been doing, and the public deserves to know. And we didn't have a chance to wordsmith it, and that's why it's there. That's all I can.
Doug, with all due respect, I'll wait till the audience is quiet. Doug, with all due respect, everybody appreciates your work, everyone appreciates Nanisha's work, Jody's work. We're all working our rear ends off. And I appreciated that you wrote this, but there was something significant in it. And you got feedback from myself and from Nanisha Nunez. There was a process in here about something critically important, a curriculum vision that Lauren has drafted. And in it, it gave a process. It said that she's met with everybody and that she will go on with Charlie to incorporate in the strategic plan. I wrote back and said, I have not had the opportunity to give meaningful feedback, and Nanisha did the same thing. and that I also felt that the board should have the opportunity to review it.
Hold on,
And-
Lisa, all it said in there was that you had met with her. You both have met with her on it.
Yeah, what I had said
Okay?
is if I could just get a copy of the most recent version, which I
Right,
didn't.
right. I mean...
No, it
That was
said
all
I
it
had
said.
reviewed the
Guys-
vision. I haven't because I never
Lisa-
got the latest.
Lisa,
I got a version that had...
emailed it to you on
Lauren,
October
I'm gonna ask you to
9th,
please
and I
not
emailed
interrupt
it
me,
to
just
you
like I ask
also
everyone
on
else.
October
All right,
30th.
interrupt me, go ahead.
I emailed it to you on October 9th. I got no reply until the 12th that you had not yet read it. I emailed it to you again at its new iteration on October 30th, and we could not meet until November 16th because of a bunch of constraints you had with your schedule, at which point you felt like you didn't have enough, you didn't feel like you could give comment. And we met with Doug, and we talked about it, and you said you needed to think about it more. And I received comment from Nanisha on the very first draft that I also sent to her on October 9th, which was positive. So thank you, Nanisha, for asking for the newest version. And as soon as it's available, I'll send it to everyone.
Lauren, with all due respect, I had asked you a number of times to meet and talk about curriculum. You said, let's wait till Calvin's in preschool, et
That's
cetera.
inaccurate, Lisa.
I remember seeing you at the farmer's market. But
That
just
was
to get
in
back to the
August.
document.
That was before I wrote this.
And then I had...
I'm sorry, Lisa, I'm not getting into this right now.
Okay, I had reached out several times, but with respect to the meeting that the three of us had at the diner, I gave you feedback, and I said, you have very specific information here about responsive classroom, et cetera, and you said, oh, no, that shouldn't be there, those were my notes. And then we talked, it took about 45 minutes to ascertain the purpose of the document, and I said I couldn't give you more feedback because I had focused on that part because I thought it was in the weeds and may not be appropriate. So then I later wrote to you and said, I would love to give you feedback, and Edit, please send it to me.
Feedback. That
No,
is
but
the feedback.
I didn't. I
But
only
the point
said
here
about
in
the
this
responsiveness.
conversation is
Hold
that
on.
what's in that document is accurate.
Yeah.
What's in that document is that you were both consulted, you both looked at it. It is accurate. It is such a high-level statement. It doesn't say anything substantive, and that's all we're talking about right now. I'd like to move on to the business items, please. 4A, business items, number 1 through 10. Does anyone have any questions?
Nope.
Not at this time.
I'd like to make a motion.
Motion to pass business items 1 through 10 under 4A.
So moved.
And second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, seeker resolution. Does anybody have any questions about the seeker resolution?
Yes. I'm sorry, I need to catch my breath. I understand you get passionate. No, but I do want to say this. It's important. You know, we follow Robert's Rules of Order. It requires decorum. It requires us to manage our emotions. I understand people get hot, but it's hard to come back to a regular meeting after a time when someone was hot. I can't not say it. I appreciate the work you do. I appreciate the work everybody does, but I think we all have to work to stay even. SECRA. I wondered about the water issue because we have significant drainage issues in our town, and especially up there. So I asked some friends of mine who've done some consulting work with the village, and they said they looked at it and they said that it does not address water. It's not a reason to vote it down, but it's something that I think we need to ask. So, again, I don't know if it's we ask you or an engineer, but there are drainage issues, and you'll notice in the winter, sometimes the path from Hillside down to the pool parking lot is literally a sheet of ice because of drainage issues. And what I was told is suddenly when you put a new roof there, you're really changing drainage, and it's something that we have to be critically aware of. That's it.
Does that have impact on the SECRA stuff? Okay.
No, we can still vote to approve, but it's something as we move forward that we need to maintain an awareness about.
Okay. Okay, so we have to pass the SECRA first. Does the SECRA and the negative declaration pass at the same time? How does that work? One and then the other. Okay. So do you have a motion to pass the SECRA resolution? Second?
Second.
All in favor? A motion to pass the negative declaration.
The what?
The negative declaration, which is essentially, do you want to maybe just, for 2 seconds, explain what that is, Veronica?
So as part of the State Environmental Quality Review Act, you're required to declare yourselves the lead agency. So part of it is the negative declaration that states that there's no negative impact on the environment. So that's the statement that you're passing now. That was provided to the district, I believe, last week. So, yep.
And so it's essentially saying there's a negative declaration of adverse environmental impact given the proposed construction.
Sure. So not a negative impact.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
It has to be approved, voted on separately from the overall SEQA.
Guess so, yeah.
Yes.
just learned
Is that right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the
It has to
question.
be voted on separately, apart from the overall SEQA resolution.
Yeah, the two resolutions.
Yep.
We don't need the roll call vote on these, though, right? Okay. Okay. So, do I have a motion to, I guess, pass the negative declaration document? And do we have a second? Okay. All in favor? Jeremy?
Second.
Okay. So for the bond resolution, we have to take a roll call vote. Janine will call out each person's name. Are there any questions about the bond resolution document?
We just state publicly what we're voting in terms of the ultimate amount that we're voting on now.
Oh, and also,
It's the amount in the document, right? $18,383,000.
To the
Right.
counts.
That hasn't changed at all in this meeting, correct, Maureen?
That's correct. 18,383,614.
Right, because earlier you voted to keep
Correct.
keep the 100,000 in, so this number would stay. So it would be presented to the voters in this form for, because the bond proposition is actually there.
Yeah, the actual, page 2 has the actual.
What is this thing about meeting on February 21st?
Oh, for voter registration, we hold our own registration. You can go in Hastings, you can register to vote in the school district elections, and you don't have to be a registered voter for the town. It's separate. Or the county. Or the county, right.
So essentially, we're passing a resolution. This resolution, I know, Tim, at one point you mentioned things can change, but once we pass this resolution, nothing can change.
Right.
So that's and this will form the basis that will, what will go on the ballot.
Well, I think the only thing that could change, just to be clear, is that when you go in Veronica, if you wanted to do a bond like we did the last time, and there's things that are beyond the contingency or something, like you could in fact just scrap some of the work.
Right. You can go lower. You can go lower.
You'll get
I mean, you would have a public conversation, there would be, the board would have.
You'll get the
if you have
actual
some
feedback from
ridiculous
contractors.
unforeseen condition or something, which I don't anticipate here, but with field work, when you get into doing like digging and things sometimes, there would
Okay.
have some slight changes, as far as scrapping some of the work.
So this 5 pages is what will be run in the Enterprise and Journal News
Yeah.
for bond proposition. But what will be on the ballot, and I will read it here for everyone's purposes, is that people will vote yes or no. Resolved that the Board of Education, the Hastings-on-Hudson Union Free School District, Westchester County, New York. The district is hereby authorized to construct improvements to Hillside Elementary School, Fairview Middle School, and Hastings High School, and to construct an addition to Hillside Elementary School, and to expend $18,383,614. Therefore, that a tax in the amount not to exceed $18,383,614 is hereby voted to pay such cost, such tax to be levied and collected in installments in such years and in such amounts as shall be determined by said Board of Education, and that in anticipation of said tax, bonds of the district are hereby authorized to be issued in the principal amount of not to exceed $18,383,614, and a tax is hereby voted to pay the interest on said bonds at the same shall become due and payable.
So Janine, what do we need to do then? Do you need to call the roll call vote? Okay.
Right, so well, first we need a motion. You have to ask for a motion.
So a motion for a roll call vote on the bond resolution?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
Okay.
Okay, so you
Do we need-
respond A or nay. We'll start with Jeremy Arnon.
A.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Lauren Berman. Aye. Okay, Doug Sunshine.
Aye.
Tim Bear.
Aye.
Jody Meyer.
Aye.
Tanisha Nunes.
Aye as well.
I don't know if that's a real aye.
And Lisa Lisbon.
Anyone want to take a bet?
Abstain, aye, nay.
I am voting aye. I don't believe it's the right project. I don't believe it does what it needs to do, but I understand the board wants to move forward, and I look at this as the equivalent of a cloture vote, and I'm going to support my board and let this move forward, even though I believe it's a lost opportunity. That would be an aye.
Okay.
All right. So, 4D, placement for services CSE and CPSC.
Real quick, I just think we need a quick explanation around this. We had been posting the recommendations that we got from Laura Sullivan here as part of our public.
No, I went back and looked at the last 3 years. They've all been executive content.
No, I don't. I was wondering if you took them out because I would always pull them up on the regular site. Is that right?
No, it was always the executive, and I think that was the confusion the last time we
Oh, okay.
said it. We thought
All
you
right.
wanted them to be in the public when you abstained from the vote.
That's
so that's
weird, though. I feel
yeah,
like
no,
they were
we had
there.
moved them
Okay.
like a few years ago because there's so few kids that it was like identifying them, but then we were, again, there was some
Then it's
confusion
not
that the
changed.
board was
That's
giving us
fine.
the direction to put it in the public.
That's fine.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the placements for CSE and CPSC?
So moved.
And a second? Second. All in favor? Okay, personnel appointments. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay. Anything on retirements or addendums?
Yeah, I would just like to quickly say, I don't know Kathleen Barnes, but I know that Jeannie Berry and Paula Higgins have been here for a very long time. They've been mainstay figures at Hillside, and I wish them the best, and it's always sad to see longtime teachers on.
Now, just so you know, we had considered inviting them this evening, but we felt that it would be better to honor them at the end of the school year when
No,
we're
I
doing
think
the
that's
tenure. So Dr. Wilson actually had gotten some things, but we were going to hold, I don't know, Charlie, if you wanted to speak, if you had it for this evening, or you were going to wait till the May meeting? Okay. We did prepare some, because all of the teachers have been in the district
No, I
over
think that's
25
great.
years.
I just wanted to acknowledge that they were retiring.
Okay, do I have a motion to pass personnel A, B, and C?
So moved.
And a second? All in favor? Okay, approval of minutes from December 10th. There's something about these. Do I have any questions about December 10th minutes?
Janine, which is the one where I asked you to pull something out? I'm getting mixed up between the 10th and the 17th. There was a
You
misstatement.
asked me to, I pulled it out. It was.
Was it the 10th or the, because we have two sets of minutes here, but one's not posted.
No, they're both posted, but I don't have to make them public until the board agrees on them. I've posted them as drafts, and one is not posted as a draft. It's for the board, and once the board approves it, I can make it public. I don't have to make it public before the board approves the minutes.
You have to make them
Draft.
public within 14 days of the last meeting, even
Right.
if it's marked draft.
So you asked me to remove a statement that I had written down about you and where the director of
Special
the
ed.
assistant superintendent position and director of special education.
Right.
So you asked me to remove that, and that was removed from the minutes.
Do you remember if that was the 10th or the 17th, though? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Because
That was the last meeting, the 17th, I think was the last.
Oh, okay. Okay, so
I
right now
can't
we're only
see
talking
them,
about the
so I can't,
10th.
But it was removed.
Okay.
And then I
Well, the 10th,
corrected.
you're talking about the
Was it
building.
10th?
No, it's not the 10th. That looks like the bond conversation.
Community bond meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't that one.
Hillside. It was on the
That's the
17th.
10th. Okay, so
that
we're
was
voting on the
removed.
10th right now?
Yeah, the 10th. So do I have a motion to accept minutes from the December
moved.
10th? Second?
Second.
All in favor? On the 17th, there was some question.
Yeah, I haven't haven't seen the latest version, because I didn't realize that it was on the executive set.
So let's put it off till the next
Let's put it off to the next, because there's some discussions around that one. So let's put that off. Committee reports, policy?
Yeah, there's the meeting minutes from December 20th on the agenda, and there is a piece of new business at the end, which is a first read of the newly revised sexual harassment policy and regulation, and this is a state-mandated change, so you'll see a version that's been reviewed by our council to include the state-mandated changes, so if you could please read that between now and the next board meeting where we will potentially vote on its update to our policy. We're also currently, there's a draft opioid prevention and Narcan administration policy that's being reviewed by our council. It's been modeled from several other Westchester area policies, and once council has reviewed our version of this policy, they'll get it back to us, and the committee will present it to the board for our first read. We're also presently reviewing our policy 2130, which is the resignation and dismissal of board members. This was a suggestion that came up to review this in light of the question of replacement of a board member and the policy and procedure that occurred in our district in the spring. So we're currently looking at our policy and area policies, and also a recommendation put forth by Jeremy, which is included in our minutes. And we're also looking at the district organization chart, and we'll be making a draft to present to council for council's consideration based on our new position of Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction and the other recommendations of management flow that have been discussed by the board.
So where would discussion about organization take place? Would it be before you write the policy? I mean, I certainly have thoughts about that I would
You
like
can
to.
address the policy committee who's working on the draft, because it's really just in draft, and we'll have another policy meeting the last Thursday of the month at 4 o'clock. But if you
never come on a
can't be
Thursday.
there, if you want to
Yeah.
share.
I'll share it with you ahead of time.
Yeah.
Is that it? Okay. This is under new business, policy first read, is that?
That's the sexual harassment policy and regulation that I mentioned.
I just want to go back for a minute. I just want the public to know that the minutes were pulled down from the December 17th meeting that we just tabled, but the video is there where they can watch the whole meeting.
Right, but we do have to post the minutes.
So they
by
were
law.
there, and then because of the changes that were asked, we pulled them down.
But by law, even if they're stamped draft, there must be...
Yeah, they were there.
But we need to put them back up, have marked as draft.
Okay, well, we'll get to when we discuss that, how you want to...
Well, yeah, I would just put them back up as resolutions, motions, and votes with no comments from anyone, and then we'll take it from there, because that's by law what we have to have.
And you can mark it draft.
Okay, traffic safety update, is that like, what are we thinking here, Maureen?
Another hour. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I just wanted to put this on here. I alluded to it earlier. I will move it till the next meeting, but I am working with a community of parents and in conjunction with the village as they're looking at safe routes, and I want to, at least the next time we can go through what the traffic engineer had prepared for the district in terms of safe drop-off zones, just for the board to consider, because there are different options that we're thinking about, potentially piloting around the building, but they would require losing parking around the building to create safe drop-off zones. So there were like 3 or 4 different scenarios that were given to us, and that was kind of also coupled. I mean, adding additional busing, which would be expensive, would probably alleviate a lot of the issues around the school, but I think the reason we haven't done that is you'd have to do a referendum to change your busing policy for older students to lessen the mileage, and then also with the additional cost. But what I'll do the next time, I'll have Janine put it on, and I'll just distribute to everybody what those are and what we're potentially going to try to pilot.
Good.
Okay, thank you for that. 9, I think we've passed over, it was this last conversation. Second public comment. Anyone for second public comment? No?
Chance, Rob.
Board of Ed comments. Does anybody have any further Board of Ed comments? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Okay.